Consider South America and Africa. Don't they kind of look like they fit together, like puzzle pieces? Well, they actually did. But about 130 million years ago, South America was like, bye, and slowly started drifting away. These days, it's around 1,800 miles from Africa, and it's still on the move. Every year, the continent shifts a little more toward the Pacific Ocean. So, how's that even happening? Tectonic plates are constantly moving. That's what makes the Earth's surface shift over time, going from this to what we see today. But those movements happen so slowly that you and I can't see them go. So, no, Brazilians or Chileans aren't out there feeling their continent inching westward. But the numbers don't lie. South America is moving, and apparently all it wants is to get as far away as possible from this massive underwater mountain range called the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. But what exactly is pushing the land toward the Pacific Ocean? It is the heat inside our planet. Way down beneath the ocean, there are cracks in the Earth's crust, and magma, super hot melted rock, rises up through those cracks. When that happens, the magma cools and hardens into solid rock. Over time, this process might build underwater mountains, like the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. And as more new crust forms, it begins to push the older crust out of the way. In the process, tectonic plates and the continents riding on top of them get pushed along. Now, on the other side of South America, over by the Pacific, there is the Nazca Plate. It's heavier and it's moving eastward. Since it is denser, it is sliding underneath the South American Plate. This entire process is called subduction, and it's happening at a rate of about 3 inches per year. By the way, the collision between these two plates is what's behind all those breathtaking volcanoes scattered throughout the Andes, and it's also making the continent move. So, if everything goes according to plan, projections show that South America will end up more centered in the Pacific Ocean in the future. But some models suggest something way crazier. Before we get into that, though, we need to clear something up. Why on earth isn't Africa following in South America's footsteps? I mean, shouldn't it be drifting west too? Well, not quite. Africa is doing its own thing because it sits on the African Plate. So the Mid-Atlantic Ridge is located between those two continents, and just like it pushes the South American Plate, it also pushes the African Plate, but in the opposite direction. It's like this ridge is trying to split up two ex-besties, But there's more. Africa is also being influenced by the East African Rift. That's one of those massive cracks we talked about earlier, but it's happening on land, which makes it extra dramatic. This is what's causing the continent to slowly split apart. It's a long story, but let's just say the rift is pulling Africa in more directions than South America ever had to deal with. Okay, now it is finally time to talk about that crazier thing that might happen to South America and everything around it in the future. Theory number 1. It could break away from North America. I know, super dramatic, but don't panic. We're talking hundreds of millions of years from now, and I won't be around. You see, both continents are moving in the same general direction, but at different speeds. The North American Plate is cruising along at about 1 inch per year, while South America is moving a bit faster. So even though they're heading the same way, they are not keeping pace. Over time, as the Atlantic Ocean continues to widen and the Pacific keeps shrinking, all this tectonic movement could eventually pull the Americas apart. Theory number 2. Marine life could go through some major changes. Right now, the Americas act as kind of a giant wall between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. Because of that, sea animals have evolved differently on each side. Take the green sea turtle, for example. The ones living in the Atlantic tend to be bigger and lighter in color. Meanwhile, their Pacific cousins are usually smaller and darker. But if, one day, there is no land blocking these two populations from mixing, they would end up with brand new migration routes, new nesting spots, and a lot more overlap in their territories. Now, multiply that scenario by hundreds of other species, and things could really get shaken up. We're talking about new interactions, unexpected competition, and maybe even the rise of entirely new species. Alright, theory number 3. America might meet Africa again. Right now, the Mid-Atlantic Ridge is busy creating a new seafloor, and because of that, The Atlantic Ocean is slowly getting wider. But in about 125 million years, scientists believe that process could come to a stop. Instead of the seafloor spreading apart, the ocean floor might start getting pulled under the continents. When that happens, the Atlantic will stop growing and start shrinking. And the water section between South America and Africa is likely to be the first part pulled beneath the land. That means the Americas and Africa could meet again. And when that happens, border countries could turn into super shaky places, with earthquakes happening all the time and brand new volcanoes popping up left and right. The eastern United States would no longer be known for the peaceful green slopes of the Appalachians, but for snow-covered giants that occasionally spew lava and ash, more like the Cascade Range out west. Countries would end up with totally new neighbors. Brazil might line up with Nigeria and Cameroon. Uruguay could be sitting right next to Angola. And Argentina might be sharing a border with South Africa. So if these two continents really do merge, how intense would that be? Well, for starters, this new supercontinent would instantly become the biggest one on Earth, about 1.5 times the size of Asia. And chances are, a brand new mountain range would form right where the continents meet, creating a natural border between nations. Being part of the same massive continent could make a lot of things way easier. For one, tourism could totally take off. People traveling between countries by land without needing pricey plane tickets could be a game changer. But it wouldn't stop there. Other types of economic activity could get a major boost too. Now on one side we have South America, which already produces and sells a wide variety of foods, from wheat to bananas, beef, cocoa, soybeans, hey, you name it. On the other side, there is Africa, exporting things like textiles and clothing. That alone would make them a super powerful bloc when it comes to trading raw goods. But can you name another important thing these two continents have in common? Yep, petroleum. Countries in South America, like Brazil, Venezuela, and Colombia, are major oil exporters. And over in Africa, you've got Nigeria, Algeria, and Libya doing the same. Now, can you see just how powerful that kind of union could be? Meanwhile, let's talk about animals. These two massive lands coming together could lead us to wild meetups, like a capybara sharing space with a Nile crocodile, or a sloth seeing a hyena from the top of a tree. This could even lead to new animal hybrids showing up, like a tabby crocodile or a sloth hyena. Okay, those weren't the cleverest names, and honestly, these animals wouldn't be able to mate or even wouldn't want to. But you get the point, right? It's not all positive, unfortunately. New species showing up could become predators, competitors, or even parasites to the native plants and animals. It would take a long time for things to settle into a new balance in those border regions. But honestly, no one really knows how long it would take. The only thing I do know is neither of us will be around to see it, which is okay.
You're digging in Egypt's famous Saqqara necropolis, also known as the ultimate VIP graveyard for pharaohs, when suddenly you find a giant pink door hiding something no one knew existed. Behind this giant stone door, one that wasn't supposed to open, by the way, you find a lost tomb of Egyptian royalty. Alright, history lovers, it's time to buckle up because archaeologists just pulled off something straight out of an Indiana Jones movie. Let's travel all the way to Saqqara, one of Egypt's most mysterious and treasure-packed ancient sites. The star of the show? The prince you've probably never heard of, Prince Userefre, son of King Userkaf. No one important, just, the founder of Egypt's 5th dynasty. No big deal. But the way his tomb was discovered… It all started with a massive door, made of pink granite, no less. But this isn't just a regular stone slab. This thing is about 14 to 15 feet tall and 4 feet wide. A giraffe could easily walk through it. This door is also definitely heavier than your neighbor's SUV. But here's the twist. It wasn't a real door. It was a false door, a symbolic gateway meant to allow the spirit of the deceased to pass between the world of the living and the afterlife. Normally, that's where the story ends. After all, false doors are common in tombs. But this one was extra special. You see, False doors were usually made out of limestone, which was pretty common and found everywhere in Egypt. To build one out of red or pink granite, people had to bring these rocks from a quarry located 400 miles away. And you can bet this wasn't a cheap trip. According to Egyptologists, this is the first time a false door of this size and material has ever been found in Egypt, making it a totally unique piece of architecture. Aside from being super expensive, this one had a surprise behind it too. When the team of researchers investigated further, they realized that this false door actually hid a real entrance. And what did it lead to? A hidden tomb packed with statues, relics, and secrets from over 4,000 years ago. The tomb belonged to Prince Userefre, but you can call him Wasar-Efra or Wasar-Efra too. Despite being totally erased from history, this fella was no minor noble. The hieroglyphs on the pink granite door listed him as the hereditary prince, governor of Buto and Nekeb, royal scribe, minister, judge, and priest of chance. Phew! He was like the ancient Egyptian version of Daenerys Targaryen. These inscriptions not only identify his political and religious roles, but also suggest he held significant power in Lower and Upper Egypt, bridging both regions through his titles. One title in particular, the Priest of Seker, links him to the deity of the necropolis, the one with the falcon head. This god was the patron of the living and god of the dead at the same time. So I guess the Forgotten Prince was sort of a big deal, considering that his tomb was placed in such a prestigious location within Saqqara. What's even more mysterious is that Prince Userefre doesn't appear in official king lists or royal family trees, which makes us wonder if he passed away before he could rule, or if his legacy was deliberately erased in one of ancient Egypt's classic political dramas. Some scholars now believe his erasure might be connected with shifting religious or political power struggles during the early 5th dynasty, especially as his father Usarkaf was reshaping Egypt's religious order. And speaking of his father, King Usarkaf was a total game changer. He wasn't just the founder of the 5th dynasty, he also kicked off a religious revolution by promoting the sun god Ra over older deities. That's right, Usarkaf built the very first sun temple at Abu Sir, setting off a dynasty-wide obsession with solar worship. After Usarkaf wrapped up his short but revolutionary reign, a whole lineup of pharaohs took the stage. Sahure, Neferirkare, Nusere-Ini, basically the boy band of the 5th dynasty. And these guys were all about two things: building pyramids and making money. They weren't just stacking stones, they were expanding Egypt's influence, opening up trade routes to far-off lands and blinging out their temples like it was nobody's business. Back in the tomb, things got even cooler. There was a beautiful red granite offering table covered with inscriptions detailing ritual foods, like an eternal menu for the afterlife, because they believed the deceased could magically eat this food. Fun fact, it was the funerary priests and their families that actually ate the food. There were also pottery shards, amulets, and painted walls, but the real showstoppers were the statues. And this is exactly where things get weird, in a good way. The team found statues of King Djoser, the guy who built Egypt's first pyramid, his wife, and their 10 daughters, inside Prince Userefre's tomb. Hold up, Djoser lived a few centuries before Usarkaf, so what were his statues doing there? Turns out, scientists don't really know. These statues were built during the reign of King Djoser himself and probably belonged to that first ever built pyramid. Experts believe these statues were probably relocated during the 26th dynasty, thousands of years after Djoser, maybe to protect them from destruction, or maybe because they were still venerated. Basically, ancient Egyptians were hoarders, but classy ones. Scientists also know for a fact that some engravings and statues found there were made way later, which means that this tomb probably turned into a deposit for fancy stuff. Or maybe this was just really ancient interior decorating. Anyway, that wasn't all. There was another pink granite entrance on the eastern side of the tomb, with inscriptions linking back to King Neferirkare, another 5th dynasty pharaoh who also tried to build his own pyramid, but failed. And near this second entrance, archaeologists found something never seen before in Saqqara: a set of 13 pink granite statues, all sitting in a row on a high-backed bench, like they were waiting at the DMV of the afterlife. Some had elevated heads, probably representing the prince's wives, while others were missing their heads entirely. One black granite statue was found upside down. Maybe it had taken a tumble sometime during the tomb's long, quiet centuries underground. According to archaeologists, the positioning and head shapes suggest that these statues followed a strict social hierarchy, with the central figures likely representing higher status individuals, while the headless ones might indicate unfinished work or later vandalism. And speaking of black granite statues, another one was found standing proudly inside the tomb. Based on its design and inscriptions, it looks like it was placed there during the 26th dynasty, the same time those Djoser statues were probably moved in. This suggests the tomb didn't just sit abandoned, it was reused, adapted, and maybe even honored by later generations. And by the way, black granite was associated with Osiris, the god of the underworld, during the late period, which means that this statue's presence is a clue that the tomb was a ritual space long after the prince's death. All of this, giant granite doors, surprise statues, reused tombs, adds up to a truly thrilling find. Prince Userefre may not be a household name yet, but his tomb is now one of the most fascinating ever found in Saqqara. It tells a story not just of the Old Kingdom, but of how ancient Egyptians kept connecting to their past, even thousands of years later. So, what does it all mean? Why hide a tomb behind a fake door? Why pack it with statues from different eras? And who exactly was Prince Userefre? These are the kinds of mysteries that keep archaeologists digging and keep the rest of us fascinated. In the end, this discovery isn't just about one tomb, it's about how much is still waiting beneath the sands of Egypt. As more gets uncovered, we're reminded again and again that ancient history isn't gone. It's just sleeping behind massive pink granite doors.
Hey, I bet you didn't know that trees used to grow in the middle of Egypt's barren, sun-roasted Sinai desert. It's true. If you can't picture it, I don't blame you. But archaeologists have recently stumbled upon a tree-lined boulevard. Yep, an actual green avenue leading to a massive ancient fortress. No, this isn't some mirage or an overactive imagination, although I do have one. But it's turning our ideas of ancient Egyptian desert life upside down. Let's rewind a bit. The site in question is called Tel Abu Saifi, located in the northern part of the Sinai Peninsula. For a long time, it was known as a dusty archaeological footnote, the home of ruins from the Ptolemaic and Roman periods. You know, the era after Alexander the Great swaggered through Egypt and the Roman Empire called dibs. But recently, Egypt's Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities decided to give it a fresh dig. And what they found out turned to be more than just a forgotten outpost. We're talking about a full-on military fortress with defensive trenches, paved roads, lime kilns, barracks for soldiers, and even room for their families. A whole bunch of living quarters right in the middle of a desert doesn't feel very homey until you remember our star, the unexpected Green Avenue. This road was over 300 feet long and 36 feet wide, as long as an American football field, paved with limestone slabs and lined with more than 500 clay planting pits. These weren't for show, they held actual trees, creating a shaded tree-line entrance straight to the fortress. Imagine walking through that, the sun blazing overhead, and suddenly, blessed shade. Ooh. Now, that's not just a grand entrance, that's an ancient red carpet, or maybe a green one. But this wasn't about curb appeal. The existence of hundreds of trees in a desert landscape over 2,000 years ago tells us something big. You see, the Ptolemaic Egyptians weren't simply good at building monuments, they were also masters of water management. In a place where rainfall is rarer than a selfie with a pharaoh, they somehow found a way to grow rows of trees. Now, let that sink in. To irrigate that many trees in a desert, they must have had a sophisticated irrigation or water transport system. something capable of moving and distributing water efficiently in this harsh climate. Maybe they channeled groundwater, or maybe they captured seasonal rain, or maybe ancient sprinkler systems. Okay, maybe not that fancy. But still, it's clear they were ahead of their time. Here's the thing, we already know the Egyptians mastered water control. They harnessed the Nile with ditches and canals to feed distant fields. So irrigation wasn't exactly a mystery to them. They had the skills and the knowledge. And sure, scientists still debate what the Sinai climate was like 2,000 years ago. But many believe it may have once been greener. After all, take one look at those dramatic mountains and rocky landscapes, shaped and sculpted as if by brute force of ancient rivers. And it's hard not to think that water once played a bigger role out there. Plus, archaeologists have found tons of evidence showing that Ptolemaic Egyptians cultivated fruits, vines, and trees on a large scale. In other words, growing a forest in a desert might feel wild to us, but to them, it was just another Tuesday. And now, this green avenue is making archaeologists wonder, what if similar irrigation systems were used elsewhere, say for transporting the enormous stones used to build the pyramids? There's already a theory that ancient rivers or human-made canals help move those stones. And the Tel Abu Saifi discovery? Well, it might just be the missing puzzle piece. This isn't just a dream. Back then, rivers were like highways, power grids, and cargo trains of the ancient world, all rolled into one. Egyptians used them for everything – irrigating crops, trading goods, powering industry, and even mobilizing for war. If you were doing something important, odds are it involved a river. But wait, it gets even better. Excavations revealed deep defensive trenches, like ancient moats, dug more than 6 feet deep around the fortress. Those weren't just muddy ditches. They were part of an elaborate defense system designed to be filled or bridged to control access. Think of it as ancient Egypt's version of a retractable security gate, minus the hydraulics. And while the trenches were keeping intruders out, life inside the fortress was bustling. Remember how we said archaeologists had found military housing units? It turns out soldiers might have lived there with their families. So this wasn't just a barracks, it was a thriving community, with meals, routines, kids playing, and probably a whole lot of ancient gossip flying around the dinner table. In addition to all the military stuff, researchers found 4 massive lime kilns used to produce quicklime, an essential ingredient for making construction mortar. These kilns are a big deal because they suggest that during the later Roman period, Tel Abu Saifi turned into an industrial hub. It was like the Home Depot of ancient Egypt, churning out materials to build and repair buildings. But here's where the plot thickens. Underneath all of this, beneath the roads, the trenches, the kilns, archaeologists found the corners of an even older structure, a mystery building. Could it be the remains of a third, much older fortress? Or an ancient cemetery or lost city? Nobody knows yet, but one thing's clear, this story isn't over. Honestly, this might be the coolest archaeological cliffhanger of the decade. So, what does this all mean? Well, for starters, it challenges everything we assumed about desert life in ancient Egypt. For the longest time, deserts were thought of as natural barriers, dry, deadly, and empty. But this find suggests that the desert might have once been green and full of life, not because the climate was dramatically different, but because the Egyptians were incredibly good at bending the environment to their will. They didn't just survive in the desert, they transformed it. It also adds fuel to the fire in the age-old debate about ancient Egyptian tech. If they could build a fortress with tree-lined roads, moats, irrigation, and industry in the middle of the Sinai, is it really such a stretch to imagine they could engineer water channels to move pyramid stones? Forget the Ancient Aliens TV show. Sure, it's entertaining, I'll give you that, but it makes us forget something crucial. Those people were brilliant. A lot of what we call modern technology is recycled ancient ingenuity. And who knows how much knowledge we've lost over time. Meanwhile, the dig continues. Scientists are now mapping the entire Tel Abu Saifi site, trying to piece together how all the structures connect. Some want to analyze soil samples to find traces of old tree roots and maybe even figure out what kinds of trees once grew there. Imagine if they were date palms, we might be looking at the world's oldest snack lane. You already know that the implications of the discoveries don't stop with history books, right? This kind of discovery has modern relevance too. Our world is going through a lot of change, with crazy weather and huge heat waves. So maybe we should be asking, what can we learn from ancient civilizations that once made the desert bloom? If nothing else, Tel Abu Saifi reminds us that the ancient Egyptians were more than just pharaohs, pyramids, and mummies. They were visionary planners, eco-architects, and straight-up problem solvers. They didn't wait for nature to hand them what they needed, they engineered it. And thanks to discoveries like this, we're getting a clearer picture of just how advanced and, frankly, how cool ancient Egyptian civilization really was. So next time someone tells you deserts are just empty wastelands, you can hit them with this fun fact. Over 2,000 years ago, in the heart of the Sinai Desert, there was a fortress with a tree-lined avenue, moats, military housing, an industrial center, and even a secret underground structure. Take that, sand dunes! Who knows what else is still buried out there, waiting to rewrite history?
Have you ever visited a famous monument and thought, alright, this is boring? While you were up on the Eiffel Tower yawning at the view, another landmark in Paris was pulling off the ultimate plot twist. Hidden in plain sight at Place de la Concorde stands a 3,300-year-old Egyptian obelisk that's been keeping juicy secrets from Pharaoh Ramses II himself. That's right. Ancient secret messages carved in stone have been right under our noses this whole time. Nope, this isn't the next National Treasure movie. This is real life, and it took a real-life Indiana Jones to crack the code. So, let's set the stage. You've probably seen this block of stone before, right? Towering 75 feet high, this massive granite pillar was originally from Luxor, Egypt, and it's been chilling in the heart of Paris since 1836. It's covered in hieroglyphs, and for years, everyone assumed we'd already cracked their code. Mystery solved. Nothing left to see here. Enter Jean-Guillaume Olet-Pelletier, French Egyptologist, cryptology expert, and part-time monument whisperer. Basically, if Indiana Jones traded his whip for reading glasses and binoculars, you'd get this guy. He's got a rather unusual hobby. He strolls up to the obelisk every now and then and casually reads hieroglyphs. For fun. Yes, he can read them fluently. No, we don't know what that says about our own hobbies. Until 2021, experts believe that the inscriptions on the obelisk mainly praise the gods Amun or Amun-Ra, if you're on friendly terms, and Horus, you know, the falcon-headed sky god with those super famous parents Osiris and Isis. But during one of his casual reading sessions, Olet-Pelletier noticed something odd. Some of the hieroglyphs weren't just singing praises to the gods, they were giving directions. Literal directions to the entrance of the Temple of Luxor. But wait, it gets even better with a little backstory. Obelisks like this weren't just pretty lawn decorations. They were usually placed at the entrances of major temples, like the Temple of Luxor, where this one originally stood. They symbolize the sun god Ra and were meant to represent a ray of sunlight frozen in stone. Basically, they were giant sacred exclamation points showing off the pharaoh's divine connection and power. Ramses II had two of them set up at Luxor's entrance to honor the gods and, of course, to brag about himself. This one got shipped off to France in the 1830s as a gift from the ruler of Egypt, Muhammad Ali. No, not the boxer. And it's been waiting for someone to take a closer look at it. Moving the obelisk to Paris was no small feat. It weighed over 220 tons and had to be transported on a ship built especially for it, called the Luxor. How original. The whole transportation cost the modern equivalent to $19 million. Interestingly, its twin obelisk still stands in Luxor, which means that researchers can compare both structures to see if the story really matches. This pairing of obelisks was intentional, meant to guide the eye and the spirit towards sacred space. Lucky for us, Jean-Guillaume picked the perfect moment to snoop around. The obelisk was undergoing restoration for the upcoming Olympic Games. Scaffolding was up, giving him rare access to the tippy top of the monument. Armed with binoculars and a ladder, he got eye level with parts of the pillars that most of us can only squint at from street level. And that's when he uncovered the real twist. Turns out, ancient Egyptians didn't just chisel random symbols into stone. They had something way cooler up their sleeves: crypto-hieroglyphs. Those were specialized, coded forms of writing used for sacred or elite messages. Basically, ancient VIP-only emojis. While your average temple priest could read standard hieroglyphs, crypto-hieroglyphs were reserved for the pharaoh's inner circle. Today, only 6 people on Earth can read them fluently. And wouldn't you know it, our French friend is one of them. Of course he is. Now, here's where things get wild. Normally, hieroglyphs written on monuments like the obelisk are read top to bottom, right to left. Simple enough. But Jean Guillaume decided to break the rules and read them horizontally instead of vertically. That's when he started spotting weird patterns, phrases, and symbols that had been hiding in plain sight for nearly 200 years. Some of these messages were so cleverly hidden, and you could only understand them if you walked around the obelisk in a certain way. He calls it 3D cryptography. That's right, the obelisk itself is like one giant ancient Rubik's Cube. Depending on the angle you read from, the message could change entirely. Yes, ancient Egypt invented something like the lenticular effect long before Pokemon cards made it cool. Okay, so what in the world does the message say now? Glad you asked. These aren't just random notes from the past. They're political gold. One inscription praises Ramses II as a divine figure who could not be dethroned. Another says the king made offerings to the god Amun, which wasn't just him being nice. This was a big political move. Back then, religion and power were totally intertwined, so showing off your divine connection was like launching a PR campaign, except instead of tweets, they used 200-ton stone monuments. Ramses II wasn't just any ruler, by the way. He reigned for over 60 years and basically pulled off the Beyoncé of pharaonic careers. He won battles, or at least said he did, built cities, temples, and statues of himself all over Egypt, and declared himself a living god. When he ordered these obelisks, he wasn't just creating monuments. He was launching ancient propaganda flyers at priests, nobles, and visiting dignitaries. In fact, Ramses II was so good at self-promotion, he may as well be the original king of rebranding. He claimed victory at the Battle of Kadesh, even though it ended in a stalemate and they had the victory carved into walls and monuments across Egypt. The Luxor obelisk was another way of reinforcing his godlike powers every time someone passed by or read its text. And here's the cherry on top. Some of these inscriptions were positioned just right so they'd be seen by nobles arriving by boat for a festival. That's probably the reason why they can only be read from a certain angle. But if you stood at the base of the obelisk, you wouldn't see much. But from a 45-degree angle standing right in the middle of the Nile, sweet stuff! Imagine pulling up to a religious celebration and seeing giant stone text basically saying, "Hey, Ramses is chosen by the gods, don't forget it." Subtle? Not exactly. Effective? You bet. Some messages even carry double meanings. One line might spell out Ramses II's full royal title. But read it differently and boom! It says he's got eternal life. That's next-level branding. You can almost hear him saying, "Look at me, still trending 3,000 years later." For decades, scholars thought this monument had given up all its secrets, but thanks to new access, modern tools, and some fresh eyeballs, we now know there's still a ton to uncover. Oleg Pelletier's full research hasn't been officially published yet, but the clues he's found are already shaking up what we thought we knew about ancient Egyptian monuments. Of course, not everyone's buying it just yet. Some scholars are skeptical, especially about the idea that boat-riding nobles could actually see those messages clearly. But let's be honest, ancient advertising wasn't easy. Even if your billboard is 75 feet tall, you still need the right angle and the right audience. So the next time you're in Paris staring at the obelisk while sipping your overpriced café au lait, remember, you're not just looking at a fancy paperweight from the 19th century. You're standing in front of an ancient Egyptian PR campaign, a 3D puzzle, and a 3,300-year-old flex from Ramses II himself. And let's be real, if that obelisk had been hiding messages this long, who's to say it's done talking? So grab your magnifying glass, channel your inner Egyptologist, and remember, the real treasure isn't gold or jewels, it's the drama chiseled in stone.
In the late 17th and early 18th centuries, Europe was infested by vampires. The situation got so wild that authorities stepped in, and even military officers investigated these creepy cases. And their conclusion was clear. Yep, vampires are definitely real. Now, we're talking about a long time before Dracula showed up in books and movies. Back then, people genuinely believed those who had passed could rise and drain the living of their blood. Tragically, their victims would not survive the encounter. But vampires didn't stay at rest. Instead, they continued walking, interacting among the living and infesting villages. These beliefs spread rapidly, causing panic across regions. It all kicked off in Eastern Europe, specifically Serbia. Villagers started panicking after mysterious passings occurred one after another. Take the story of Petar Blagojevic, a Serbian peasant who passed in 1725. Shortly after his burial, villagers claimed that Petar returned, knocking on doors and asking for shoes or food. Sounds harmless, right? Well, not really. Within days, those villagers began mysteriously passing away too. 9 people perished in total. Everyone freaked out, insisting Petar was responsible, as if he managed somehow to come back from the grave at night to feast on the living. Eventually, authorities dug up Petar's body to see what was going on. They wanted to check if there were any signs that he was still alive. So they looked closely at his hair, beard, and nails to see if they had grown. And they actually had. In fact, there was no sign of decomposition at all. His body looked fresh. Then they found something even weirder. There was some blood around his mouth. And that was enough for people to say, see, he's definitely a vampire. Then came Arnold Paoli, arguably the most infamous vampire of them all. He was a soldier who lost his life after falling off a hay wagon and breaking his neck. But there was something strange about it. Before that tragic event, Paoli claimed he had been bitten by a vampire once. Luckily, he said he cured himself by eating soil from the vampire's grave and smearing himself with its blood. Sorry, not exactly dinner table talk, eh? But hey, if he was cured, no one had anything to worry about after he was gone, right? Well, not exactly. Within a month after Paoli was buried, 4 people said they were being tormented by him. And not long after that, they were gone too. 10 days after Paoli was buried, the villagers dug him up, just to be sure everything was, well, normal. And this is where things got eerie. His body hadn't decomposed. His hair, nails, and beard had all grown longer, and fresh blood was dripping from his mouth. Remind you of someone? Yep, our guy Peter. But in Paoli's case, it was more disturbing. The blood wasn't just coming from his mouth. It was pouring from his eyes, nose, and ears. His shirt, his coffin, everything was completely soaked in red. Now, terrified, the villagers drove a stake through his heart and burned his body. Oh, and they also dug up the 4 people they believe he had targeted just to be safe. They went through the same process with them just to make sure none of them would return as vampires. Hey, who knows? But their vampire nightmare didn't stop there. A few years later, in the winter of 1731, a new epidemic occurred. 13 people passed within several weeks. Eventually, even local authorities stepped in, sending official investigators to calm things down. Their reports, incredibly, concluded that the vampire attacks were real, at least according to witnesses. That official validation changed everything. It kicked off a wave of vampire hysteria all across Europe. But why was everyone so quick to believe those who had passed away were coming back? One big reason was how little people understood health problems at the time. Bodies that appeared fresh or swollen after burial, blood around mouths, or even fingernails and hair seemingly growing, these natural post-mortem changes were mistaken for supernatural signs. Another thing villagers misunderstood was decomposition itself. Natural gases cause bodies to bloat, making them look as if they had recently been active. This terrifying image reinforced local beliefs that these people weren't at rest, but instead returning to cause harm. Plus, under certain circumstances, the decomposition process can be delayed for a long time. One reason this can happen is because of something called saponification. This is a natural process that happens when a body is buried in a cold and damp place, exactly like in some parts of Eastern Europe. In this kind of environment, the fat in the body can turn into a waxy soap-like substance. This wax covers the body and helps stop it from rotting. Okay, but how to explain the nails and hair growing? It's more like an optical illusion, not real growth. Now what happens is that the skin dries out and pulls back a little. When the skin shrinks like that, it makes things like stubble on the chin or fingernails look longer than they were before. But that's not the case. And what about the blood? Well, it turns out science has an explanation for that too. How long blood stays liquid after someone passes depends a lot on the surrounding temperature. In colder places, it can stay fluid for days. So if a body was dug up, there's a good chance they'd still find liquid blood in the veins. It might have looked strange, even scary, but it was just the cold doing its thing and slowing everything down. Medical researchers today believe that many so-called vampire symptoms match up with conditions like rabies. Back then, most people in these communities kept animals around, and villages were usually near forests full of wildlife. And there's still no truly effective cure for rabies. This condition can cause things like insomnia, aggression, biting, and even a fear of water, which lines up closely with the way vampires were described. So it turns out all these supposed supernatural events had logical explanations. Today, we might make fun or roll our eyes at the idea of real vampires roaming around Eastern Europe. But back then, those fears were taken very seriously. Whole communities were thrown into panic. There are plenty of documented cases where families dug up their loved ones and removed their hearts, all because they believed the person was a vampire behind the strange things happening to the rest of the family. And newspapers across the continent picked up these stories, spreading the fear far beyond where it all started. What's wild is that stories about blood-sucking creatures didn't just show up in Europe. Similar myths popped up across different continents and time periods. In the Philippines, for example, there is the Manananggal, a flying creature that splits in half. In Chile, they've got the Peyote, a shape-shifting being that drains blood. And in Australia, some indigenous tribes told stories of the Yaramayahu, a little red creature that drops out of trees and drinks your blood with suckers on the ends of its hands and feet. How cute. Well, back in Europe, the hysteria faded by the late 18th century, thanks to growing medical knowledge. But as you know, the legend never really went away. It just shifted into literature and gave rise to famous characters like Dracula. The author, Bram Stoker, was inspired by stories that had been going around since the 1700s. But he turned them into romanticized fictional monsters. You know, sharp teeth, pale skin, black clothes, that whole thing. And that was different from what the villagers believed they were dealing with. And, in a way, those frightened villagers weren't completely wrong. Something was draining those people's lives. But it wasn't vampires. It was just misinformation mixed with a whole lot of imagination running wild. So, next time you see a vampire movie or read a scary story, remember that behind the fiction lies a fascinating truth. A real wave of fear, confusion, and panic that swept Europe nearly 300 years ago, leaving a chilling legacy that still fascinates us today.
In ancient Egypt, in an ancient temple, in a dark ancient hall, ancient people are performing a very ancient ritual. In black robes and hoods, by the light of burning candles, They're trying to turn ordinary metals into gold. They're whispering ancient incantations and mixing unknown substances. There's smoke, hissing, fluttering, and disappointment. Guys, you can try as much as you want, but you won't succeed. At least for a few thousand more years, until 2025. Scientists have achieved what alchemists were dreaming of for centuries. They didn't use magic or spells. Neither did they mix different substances. They used a giant tube about 17 miles long to accelerate lead molecules to speeds close to the speed of light. In a sense, the Philosopher's Stone appeared inside the Large Hadron Collider. Oh yes, in case you didn't know, the Philosopher's Stone is a mythical stone that ancient alchemists believed existed, a stone capable of turning any metal into gold. So, scientists were able to do this inside the LHC, but it's not that simple. Technically, yes, they managed to turn metal into gold, but in fact, the amount of this gold is negligible, and it quickly disappears. By the way, the LHC allows you to accelerate molecules of different substances to a speed close to the speed of light, and thus shows us how the universe was born, only on a small scale. Why do this? More on that later. For now, let's get back to that gold. Scientists believed that the precious metal could appear as a result of the collision of two lead particles, but experiments have shown that gold appeared even without full contact. There are two explanations. One is more scientific and the other is simpler. Let's start with the first one. So, there are 82 protons inside the lead nucleus, and each of them carries a charge. Because of this, the electromagnetic field of the lead core is quite strong. When two lead particles fly past each other at almost the speed of light, their electromagnetic fields are compressed into a thin pellet. This creates a short-term pulse of photons. The pulse triggers a process known as electromagnetic dissociation, when a photon interacts with the nucleus, causing internal vibrations. These vibrations emit neutrons and photons and change the essence of the element. When two lead atoms fly past each other, they lose 3 protons and turn into gold. This way, scientists managed to produce 89,000 gold cores per second. Unfortunately, this is too little. 29 picograms in total. This is much less than 1 gram. These gold particles are also short-lived. They are so energetic that they immediately crash into the walls of the collider. After that, they instantly decay into protons, neutrons, and other particles. Technically, there is gold, but there's too little of it, and it disappears instantly. And now, a simpler explanation. Two lead atoms are flying at each other at almost the speed of light. They're surrounded by powerful electric fields and have 82 protons each. When they fly close to each other, their electric fields become even stronger and push 3 particles out of each other. Now they have 79 protons each, which means that they have turned into gold. And these happy golden particles fly in different directions and crash into different parts of the collider. That's it, there's no more gold. Scientists used a special device to see this process. During the 3 years of the operation of the collider, scientists have been able to create 86 billion gold atoms. It's much less than a gram. Actually, it's less than a billionth of a gram. It's possible to get rich using such a transformation, given that the price of the Large Hadron Collider is several $billions. So why is it necessary? For science, obviously. Yes, it doesn't sound very useful, but the collider wasn't built to turn lead into gold. Its purpose is to explore our universe through the micro-universe. For example, the LHC helped discover the Higgs boson. You probably haven't heard anything about it, but it's one of the greatest discoveries of recent times. Let me explain. A barbell, a hair, an apple, a drop of water. All these objects have different weights. But why? What makes them have a certain mass? Scientists have suggested that the entire universe is filled with the Higgs field. It's like an invisible syrup. Some particles get stuck inside this field and become heavy, like protons. Others easily glide through this syrup, like particles of light, photons, that have no mass. Without the Higgs field, atoms would fly apart and then nothing would have any weight. Imagine how chaotic the universe would be. So in 2012, scientists were able to detect a small piece of this syrup with the help of the LHC. They named it the Higgs boson. The Large Hadron Collider also helped to detect quarks. These are small particles that protons and neutrons consist of. They're like tiny pieces of Lego, forming a particle. Previously, scientists thought that each proton and neutron had 2 or 3 particles, but later they discovered particles with 4 and 5 quarks. It turns out that our universe is not built the way we thought. Okay, but why would we ordinary people care about that? What difference does it make if protons inside an apple are made up of 2 or 4 quarks? Wait, you'll get the answer soon. Inside the collider, scientists were also able to obtain quark-gluon plasma. It's the hottest substance in the universe, 100,000 times hotter than the Sun. The plasma appeared when experts collided 2 lead atoms with each other. Scientists believe that at the time of the birth of the universe, such a red-hot drop appeared immediately after the Big Bang. That sounds pretty impressive, but what's the point? Be patient and wait a little longer. Some of the most impressive studies deal with the search for particle twins. Scientists suggest that the electron, for example, has a shadow twin, something like a superparticle, and the same applies to everything in the universe. Scientists have not yet found such twins, but who knows what will happen in the future. The presence of doppelgangers will help us find out what dark matter is. This unknown substance makes up about 85% of the universe, but we know almost nothing about it. Gravity keeps planets in orbit, prevents Earth from splitting into billions of pieces, and keeps us on our feet. But gravity is invisible. It's some kind of force that works because, no one knows why it works. Dark matter can help answer this question. Scientists believe that when 2 particles collide, dark matter particles are born, and they want to detect this moment. The LHC changes our understanding of how the standard laws of physics work. It has shown the existence of invisible, unknown processes within the universe. The LHC allows you to unravel the mystery of quantum physics. So far, we have more questions than answers, but work is constantly underway. And of course, a question arises. Why is all this necessary? The answer is, we don't know. Yet. Physicists receive billions of dollars to conduct strange experiments where they disperse tiny invisible particles and collide them with one another. It's like learning complex mathematical formulas you will never use in life. Can't we spend this money on something else? The fact is that all these expensive studies inside the collider help us understand this world better. They change our perception of how the laws of physics work in our universe. Let's look into the past. Scientists like Michael Faraday and Thomas Edison also did some strange, incomprehensible things related to an invisible thing called electricity. But thanks to that research, we now have phones, laptops, music, speakers, computers, hair dryers, water heaters, and everything else that modern life seems impossible without. And it all started with scientists conducting experiments with some invisible energy. Look where we are now. It's difficult to imagine where the research of quantum physics will lead us in 50 or 100 years. Perhaps we will be able to travel between parallel universes or learn how to teleport.
Get ready, because one of the Pacific Ocean's most active volcanoes might blow any minute now. Scientists monitoring axial seamount, a gigantic underwater lava factory just off the coast of Oregon, say it could erupt literally any time between today and early 2026 at the latest. Yes, it's underwater, but don't get tricked by the ocean's cover. This beast is almost 3 times taller than the Empire State Building. This volcano is inflating like a souffle at a Michelin-starred restaurant, and scientists are so excited they will live stream it. Seriously! So here's the thing. This volcano will explode at any moment now because, well, it's inflating fast. Over the past few months, researchers have noticed that the seafloor is literally rising. It's like Axial is doing its best impression of a waterbed filled with molten rock. Scientists call this inflation, which sounds like something you'd complain about after Thanksgiving dinner. But in volcano terms, it means magma is piling up underground, causing the seafloor to bulge like a souffle that's this close to collapsing. Now, an underwater volcanic eruption might not sound so exotic. After all, most volcanic activity on Earth happens under the sea. Believe it or not, there are more than 1 million submarine volcanoes quietly churning lava beneath the waves as you watch this. The ocean floor is Earth's biggest volcanic hotspot. What makes axial seamount so thrilling is that it's under intense scientific surveillance, unlike any other underwater volcano. It's like the star player in a volcanic reality show, with a network of ocean-bottom instruments giving researchers real-time updates on magma movements, seismic tremors, and crust deformation. In fact, Axial Seamount hosts the world's first-ever underwater volcanic laboratory. Scientists have been keeping a constant eye on it since the 1990s, when they installed sensors that now relay live data straight from the seafloor. This kind of monitoring is unheard of elsewhere and has turned Axial into a geological celebrity, one whose behavior we can track with remarkable precision. Besides, Axial is hilariously predictable. It erupts roughly every decade, and right on cue, it's gearing up for another performance. By mid-2024, it had inflated to nearly the same level as before its last eruption, which means the countdown is on. Scientists are so confident in its schedule that they've set up a volcanic advent calendar, waiting for the day when Axial decides to pop. But hold on, Axial Seamount isn't just your average underwater volcano. It's got style, personality, and a geological identity of its own. Now, most underwater volcanoes, called seamounts, tend to look like cones or flattened domes. Axial laughs in the face of tradition with its unfashionably rectangular caldera, a 2-by-5-mile crater that looks like it was designed by a geologist with a ruler and a grudge against curves. Most volcanoes opt for the classic circular look, but Axial, it went full avant-garde. This caldera is punctuated by fissures, vents, lava channels, and mysterious dome-like structures that rise hundreds of feet high. It's like the volcano's wearing a funky geometrical crown instead of the usual rounded hat. What's more, Axial's location is like prime real estate for geological fireworks. It sits right where 2 major forces collide, literally. First, it's on the Juan de Fuca Ridge, an underwater mountain range formed where 2 tectonic plates are slowly pulling apart, like a zipper being undone. Second, it's perched atop the Cobb Hotspot, a deep mantle plume that acts like Earth's sneaky magma espresso machine, pumping molten rock from deep inside the planet and fueling a whole chain of seamounts. To put it plainly, it's like the tectonic plates are reluctant dance partners, sliding away from each other, while the Cobb Hotspot acts as the DJ, turning up the heat and keeping the magma party going. This dual influence creates a complex plumbing system inside the volcano, with magma chambers filling, draining, and shifting in ways scientists are still trying to decode. The competition between the spreading plates and upwelling magma is what gives Axial its unique geological fingerprint, and it's also why this volcano keeps surprising us. Now, we said that Axial Summit isn't just a crater. The truth is that inside, the action gets even weirder and cooler, well, hotter, but you get it. Axial hosts black smoker hydrothermal vents, which blast superheated water at temperatures exceeding 700 degrees Fahrenheit. This is no ordinary underwater hot tub. These vents create one of Earth's most extreme environments, where bizarre creatures thrive in total darkness and scalding heat. Giant tube worms, crabs, colonies of bacteria, and even octopuses live off the mineral-rich plumes that gush from these vents, forming ecosystems completely independent from sunlight and photosynthesis. It's like an alien world beneath the waves, thriving off the volcano's fiery breath. These vent communities are crucial to science, not just because they're strange, but because they may resemble the earliest ecosystems on Earth. Some researchers believe life on our planet may have originated in similar deep-sea hydrothermal environments billions of years ago. Studying them could also help us search for life on icy moons, like Europa and Enceladus, where similar vents might exist beneath their frozen surfaces. When axial erupts, it's like a natural reset button for these communities. The lava wipes everything out, but within months, life comes roaring back. Proof that even in the most hostile environments, real estate is always in demand. For those worrying about tsunamis or coastal disasters, relax. Axial eruptions are the underwater equivalent of a slow cooker. The immense water pressure keeps things chill, well, scalding, but not explosive. So the worst thing that happens is some lava decorates the seafloor, and a few crabs have to find new vents to squat in. This means no massive ash clouds or explosive blasts that could reach the surface. Instead, lava oozes out and spreads across the seafloor, sometimes traveling for miles. But for scientists, this eruption is the golden ticket. Understanding axial patterns could help predict eruptions elsewhere, even on land. Plus, its bizarre ecosystems offer clues about how life might survive on other planets. Not bad for a volcano that mostly just sits around looking rectangular. Still, the volcano's activity can be heard in the form of thousands of small earthquakes every day. Thousands! As if the volcano itself was groaning and creaking, preparing to burst open. Again, we won't feel a thing, but at least they'll help scientists track the magma's movements and the volcano's eruptive cycle. Now, one of the coolest parts of this story is that scientists are preparing to live-stream Axial's next eruption for the first time ever. Imagine watching an undersea volcano in action, live, as it's painting the ocean floor with fresh lava. It's like a front row seat to a natural fireworks display, thousands of feet beneath the waves. The livestream will come courtesy of the Ocean Observatory's initiative, which maintains a series of fiber optic cables linking Axial's instruments directly to shore. It's the Wi-Fi of the deep sea, and it's about to broadcast molten rock in HD. And there's another twist. Scientists have noticed a curious pattern in Axial's eruptions. All three of its most recent eruptions, in 1998, 2011, and 2015, happened between January and April, the months when Earth starts moving away from the Sun. So why? Well, it might have something to do with the Moon's gravitational pull. The Moon's orbit causes ocean tides to rise and fall, which changes the pressure on the seafloor and could help nudge the magma chamber to its breaking point. I guess the Moon isn't just a romantic light in the night sky. It might be the ultimate volcanic whisperer. So, one thing's for sure, when Axial goes, it'll be the best documented underwater eruption in history. So, keep your eyes peeled. This is one natural spectacle you won't want to miss. And who knows, if we're lucky, we might even get deep-sea eruption ASMR out of the deal. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'll be refreshing the live feed like it's a Taylor Swift ticket sale. A huge power outage hit Spain, Portugal, and parts of southwest France all at once, leaving millions of people without electricity. It happened on Monday morning, April 28, 2025, and caused lots of problems. Airports couldn't function, trains stopped in places like Lisbon and Madrid, and some hospitals had to cancel surgeries because they had no power. Everything just came to a stop. No one is sure yet what caused the blackout, but the company in charge of Portugal's electricity said it might have been something strange called induced atmospheric vibration. That's a rare and weird thing that can happen in the sky and might mess with power systems. It occurs when substantial changes in temperature and wind mess with giant power lines, making them wiggle and shake in strange ways. These wobbles can confuse the power system and cause big problems. So, REN, the company that runs Portugal's electricity, first said that those weird wobbles might be the reason everything went dark. But later, they said that was not really what happened. According to REN, The real reason for the blackout was a huge voltage change, like a power surge, in Spain's power grid. At that moment, Portugal was using electricity from Spain. When that enormous power fluctuation hit, it triggered automatic safety systems in Portugal. Those systems shut everything down to protect power plants. Sadly, it also caused a nationwide blackout. During extreme weather in Spain, the air temperature changes fast, and that makes immense power lines stretch or shrink like rubber bands. That changes how tight they are and how they move in the wind, which can mess with both their physical balance and the electricity flowing through them, making the entire system unstable. Some experts say that if things get bad enough, this can even break power lines, cause short circuits, or even damage the towers holding up the lines. That's why safety systems are always in place. They're supposed to shut parts of the grid down automatically to stop bigger disasters. During the blackout, something like a domino effect happened. When parts of the power grid shut down, it made other parts unstable too. Some of the big electricity generators couldn't handle the chaos and had to disconnect. And when you suddenly lose those big generators, the power system can't keep up. It's something like too many people needing electricity, but not enough of it being made. It can cause even more blackouts to spread fast. Nobody knows exactly what started the blackout. Some people wondered if it might have been a cyber attack, like someone messing with the system on purpose through computers. But officials from Spain and the European Commission said that there was no proof of that. Spain's electricity company made it clear. Cyber attack? Nope, that's not the problem. Still, one big reason so many places were hit is because Europe's power grids are all connected like one big web. Usually, that's a good thing, since if one country has a problem, another can help by sharing electricity. At the same time, everything has to stay super balanced. The amount of electricity being made must match how many people are using it. If even one part gets knocked out, it can mess things up for other parts nearby, especially if they were depending on it. In other words, when something big goes wrong, it can travel through that web and cause problems in lots of countries at once, just like what happened in this case. And it's not the first time this kind of thing has happened. Back in 2003, most of Italy had no power for 12 hours because of a problem with an electricity line connected to Switzerland. In 2006, overloading of lines coupled with low temperatures caused too much power to surge through Germany's grid, which ended up knocking out power in many parts of Europe. Anyway, speaking of the recent blackout, by Tuesday morning, things started getting better. Most of the lights came back on across the Iberian Peninsula. That's Portugal and Spain. All of Portugal had power again, and 99% of Spain did too. Now, the people in charge are trying to figure out exactly what went wrong and how to make sure it never happens again. So yeah, power grids are awesome when they work. When things go wrong, they can go really wrong. Now, let's travel back into the past, to the year 2012. Long time ago, huh? That's when India had one of the biggest blackouts in history. More than 600 million people lost electricity. That's like half the country or the entire population of Europe. This huge mess happened when 3 enormous power grids all broke down at once. Yep, those very grids that move electricity around. So when they fail, the lights go out everywhere. Because of this, entire cities just stopped working. Trains couldn't move, water pumps stopped, traffic lights went dark, and people were stuck all over the place. In Delhi, the capital city, the metro shut down, and passengers had to be helped off the trains. Without traffic lights, the roads turned into giant traffic jams. The blackout hit 20 of India's 28 states, including big ones like Punjab, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan, and West Bengal. In West Bengal, around 200 miners got stuck underground because the elevator stopped working. Luckily, they were all rescued safely. Engineers worked all night to fix things, and by the next day, they managed to get the power back on for all 3 grids. In India, smaller power cuts happen a lot, especially in cities. That's because the country doesn't make enough electricity for everyone, and the equipment they use is pretty old. But a full grid collapse like this is rare. Before this, it happened in northern India back in 2001, so when it happened again in 2012, and across 3 grids no less, it was very important. Everything just shut down, and it showed how much the system needed fixing. But blackouts like these happened in Europe before, too. Back in 2006, something weird happened because people in Germany got cold. It was a chilly Saturday night, and families in northern Germany turned on their heaters all at once. This sudden spike in energy use put a huge load on the power grid. To make things worse, one major power cable had been turned off for a bit so a ship could pass under it. Ooh, talk about bad timing. The grid couldn't handle everything, and it started breaking down. First, Western Germany had blackouts. Then things started going wrong in France, where even the big French power company, EDF, couldn't keep up with demand. Before long, power was going out in Paris, its suburbs, and other parts of the country. Then the trouble spread to Italy, Spain, and Belgium, and even Morocco. Millions of homes were left without power. In France alone, about 5 million people were left in the dark. Trains stopped running, and fire crews got loads of calls from people stuck in elevators. One of the people in charge said the whole thing started falling apart like a house of cards. Country after country started pulling power from France, which only made things worse. To stop a total blackout across all of Europe, they had to shut down some electricity for a short while on purpose. Over in Italy, the lights went out in both northern and southern regions. This country often imports electricity from other places, so it got hit hard. A few years earlier, in 2003, most of Italy had gone dark during another big blackout. Belgium had its own problems, while Spain saw power cuts in some of their larger cities. Even trains and high-speed rail had to stop in some places. It all started because too many people needed electricity at the same time, and the European power network couldn't keep up. Experts later said that the whole thing showed just how badly Europe needed to update and fix its old electricity systems to stop something like this. Hey there! Yeah, you, my friend, on the other side of this screen. You're listening to my voice and watching this video, which was created in certain computer programs and is streaming on the device of your choice. So, perhaps there's not much difference between you and me, because there's a chance that you're also created inside a special app. You don't believe that? Well, let's try to figure out this crazy theory. So, meet Dr. Melvin Vopson. He explores the idea that our universe is a computer simulation. Yes, you've probably heard it before. Elon Musk has made similar statements, but what exactly do these people mean? Melvin Vopson believes that gravity is a life hack that the universe uses to reduce the load on its computing processor. It's like programs for compressing files on your computer, only on a gigantic scale. Now, what is gravity? In simple words, it's the force of attraction between any objects having mass. Our planet is round and doesn't break up into billions of pieces because of gravity. We walk on the ground and don't fly off into the sky because of gravity. The phone is lying on your desk thanks to, say it with me, gravity. The moon orbits the Earth following the same trajectory. The planets of the solar system travel in the same orbits around the sun. Almost the entire universe strictly adheres to the laws of physics, and one of the greatest of these laws is gravity. I don't say the whole universe, because there are unknown things, such as dark matter and the like, that we don't know anything about. So gravity helps to keep order. But then, what does a computer program have to do with it? There are tons of different objects in the universe. Let's say our planet consists of the core, rocks, dust, air, various gases, trees, and a billion other things. Without gravity, all these things would fly away in different directions. Each of them has its own speed, size, and density. All this is a huge amount of information. But the force of gravity unites them into one object, the planet. And when all these billions of things are together, it's easier for the universal computer to process and read information. How about another example? Snowflakes have a remarkably similar shape. The waveform is nearly the same. The appearance of galaxies in distant space seems to be drawn according to a single pattern. And there are a lot of such symmetries in nature. and almost all of them are symmetrical thanks to gravity. What if this similarity is just another example of data optimization? Imagine if snowflakes looked different. It would be difficult for the computer to process each shape. But gravity forces all this matter to reduce the load on the processor. Gravity organizes and structures the universe, just like the archiver program on your computer. But why is this necessary? Well, in the case of the computer, data compression helps save space and improve the work of the processor. In our universe, everything seems to be working stably. It remains organized. Dr. Vopson suggests that all the elementary particles in our universe, such as atoms, electrons, photons, and the like, are tiny building blocks that contain information. It's like the cells inside our body that contain DNA. The scientist also draws an analogy with computer data. Any picture, video, game, or anything else on our screens consists of tiny bits of information in the form of binary data, ones and zeros. Our universe can work in the same way. If there's no information in a cell, it is zero. If there is matter inside, it's a unit. This is the principle used to develop computer games, VR apps, and complex simulations. But unlike computer programs, a cell in our universe can hold more than one particle. Thanks to this ability, particles can get together inside this cell. In terms of performance and energy savings, it's much easier to calculate the location and momentum of a single large object in space than many smaller disconnected objects. Gravity supports this optimization process. Of course, all this is just speculation, and scientists don't have any unmistakable evidence to support this theory. But there's one more thing that may indicate that we live in a simulation. You've probably heard of the observer effect in physics. When you observe the tiniest particles, like photons, they behave in a certain way. But when no one is watching them, they behave differently. This is how pixels behave in a video game. Imagine that you're riding a motorcycle while playing a game. There's a forest ahead of you. You see well-drawn trees that look like real ones, but then you stop and quickly turn in the opposite direction. If your computer is not enormously powerful, you may notice that the textures are loaded with a delay of a fraction of a second. If you're looking at a city, at first it's just the outline, and then you start seeing houses and lights. This happens because when we're not looking at the city, the computer doesn't load its textures to reduce the load on the processor. What's the point of wasting gigabytes of data if the player doesn't interact with the city in any way? But when you do look at the city, the processor shows it in all its beauty. And while you can see the streets and buildings, the forest disappears behind you until you look at it. The smallest particles of our universe act similarly. They stay unloaded till you watch them. The theory is entertaining, but there's one nuance. Photons and other tiny particles behave differently when you're not observing them, not because the universe saves data, but because the observer influences the behavior of particles. That is, while observing them, you use your eyes or lenses or some kind of device and detector. The very fact of observation changes matter, which is why photons behave this way. So, we don't know yet whether our universe is modeled or not. But what is the difference between a simulated computer program and the real world? Maybe the reality of the world is meant to be modeled inside a super powerful program. And if we are part of this world, then we are also like programs? In this case, the world is very real to us. It's perfect for us. Now imagine you take a computer character from a video game and place them in our reality. They simply can't exist in our world. They are much more comfortable living where you got them from. The world of the video game for them means the same as our world means for us. So, if there's a reality beyond our universe, then think twice. Would you like to get there? The human brain is unlikely to be able to perceive another reality, and if it tries, where is the guarantee that it won't go crazy? So, it's better to enjoy our universe. And don't forget that there's a whole universe inside each of us. No, seriously, where are the limits to your imagination? You can imagine absolutely anything in your head. A giant ship with long spider legs moving through a desert or rain where tiny Eiffel Towers fall to the ground instead of raindrops. There are trillions of possibilities in your imagination. But besides that, there are also feelings and emotions, joy, irritation, love. Yeah, you can say that our feelings are the result of chemical reactions in the brain. But don't you think there might be something more behind it? For example, you see a homeless guy, you give him some money and food. You show you care, thanks to the neurons responsible for empathy and feelings of mercy. But what if you're going home after a dreadful day at work and see that homeless person again? You're irritated, tired, and the neurons responsible for empathy are disabled. But even so, you can still show care for this homeless guy and give him food. That is, you do it regardless of the chemical processes in your brain. And this is just one example out of millions. Is a computer program capable of such a thing? If we live in a simulation, and if we're programs, then we are incredibly complex, advanced, and beautiful programs. And how do such perfect programs differ from what we call real in our heads? Although the word programs is not appropriate here, we are creations. Then, who is the creator? Or is there such a thing? Well, hate to stop here after asking the big metaphysical question, but hey, I gots to go. Stone Age people were grunting cavemen with spears. True or false? Absolutely false. They were gathering around and forming real culture as far as we've discovered. In Turkey, scientists uncovered a 12,000-year-old mystery that's revising history. It's a sophisticated cosmic calendar made out of giant stone temples that may actually be a warning from the stars. We're talking about Göbekli Tepe. This prehistorical site predates even Stonehenge, our classical stone ring circle, by 6,000 years. And it upends why we think Stone Age civilizations emerged and thrived. Here's how this discovery could change our collective history. Around 10,850 BCE, a massive comet, or better yet, a bunch of comet fragments, smashed into Earth. The skies darkened, the temperature dropped, big animals vanished, and it kicked off a mini ice age that lasted over 1,200 years. What's now a place called Göbekli Tepe was home to a group of humans who survived this entire chaotic event. After it happened, they started paying close attention to the sky. As a way of trying to control time a little bit more, they tracked the movements of the sun, the moon, the planets, and comets. This in turn led them to build a huge lunisolar calendar, the first one in the world. Now, if you were to tour around this classic Stone Age monument, you'd see that not all the stone pillars are blank. Some of them have carvings, like this main one with a bunch of V's on it. Turns out there are 365 V's, which scientists believe represent the days of the solar year. One of them, a V hanging on a bird's neck, is thought to mark a solar eclipse. Other pillars have dangerous animals carved on them, like foxes, lions, scorpions, vultures, twisting and crawling up the sides. Unlike typical Stone Age carvings, these weren't of edible animals like deer or sheep. One of the theories is that these drawings were symbolic. Some archaeologists believe they reflect the fears and chaos this civilization had lived through, a kind of collective attempt to make sense of a terrifying and unpredictable world. Archaeologist Danielle Stordur has highlighted the images of vultures, saying they represent the people who passed away. In some ancient cultures, vultures were believed to carry the souls of the deceased into another realm. She's seen similar symbols in ancient sites nearby. To understand why this all makes sense, we need to dig deeper into the real purpose of this site. Göbekli Tepe was discovered in 1994 by German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt, who realized that the hill in southeastern Turkey wasn't just another Neolithic mound. Underneath it, his team uncovered massive stone circles supported by pillars weighing up to 20 tons. Radiocarbon dating puts the site at around 12,000 years old, making it the oldest known ceremonial structure ever built. I mean, it predates the Egyptian pyramids by over 7,000 years. This discovery shocked the archaeological world. At the end of the Ice Age, humans were supposed to be nomadic, surviving off wild plants and animals, not building sacred complexes with symbolic art, and giving birth to what we now classify as civilization. We usually think civilization starts with farming, then villages, then crops. But this site suggests something more surprising. Early humans may have come together not to grow food, but to worship. Schmidt found no signs of homes, hearths, or permanent settlement, just stuff used for rituals and gatherings. This has led researchers to believe that spirituality and communal rituals came first and that farming followed. Because to build something this massive, you'd need hundreds of people working together, which in turn would have sparked the need for food, organization, and social structure. In other words, the temple came first, then the village, then the farm. Now, Göbekli Tepe isn't just stirring debate because it's old. It's because it seems too advanced for its time, and that's where the more controversial theories start to emerge. Some researchers believe the builders of Göbekli Tepe weren't simply primitive hunter-gatherers experimenting with stone tools. They may have been the inheritors of ancient knowledge, remnants of a much older civilization that existed before the end of the last ice age. This idea ties into the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, a theory that a comet struck Earth around 10,850 years ago, triggering a sudden and catastrophic climate shift. According to this view, the survivors of that event passed down their knowledge through symbolism, architecture, and oral tradition. And Göbekli Tepe could be one of the earliest attempts to preserve that memory. Now, if that's true, then the carvings at this site, especially the animal symbols on the pillars, aren't just decorative. They could be astronomical codes, tracking constellations and celestial events. But one pillar might hold the biggest secret of all. It's called the Vulture Stone, and it's freaking archaeologists out. On it, you'll find a strange combination of figures: a headless man, birds, and a scorpion. To the untrained eye, it might seem random, but some researchers believe these are ancient representations of constellations, like Scorpius among them, and that the headless man symbolizes a mass extinction event. Some even argue that this is the oldest known record of a comet impact, the one that triggered the Younger Dryas. And if you're wondering who this older lost civilization might have been, they are called Atlantis, or more neutrally, Civilization X. Theorists like Graham Hancock suggest that this advanced culture, destroyed in the chaos of the comet impact, passed fragments of its knowledge to survivors around the globe. In that case, Göbekli Tepe wasn't the start of civilization, it was the restart. Now, back to the stones. Pillar 43 may look like a celestial calendar at first, but when archaeologists recreated the sky patterns encoded in its carvings, they found a precise snapshot of the sky dating back over 13,000 years. It appears to show a meteor shower, a flood, and humanity's tragic end, aka the Headless Man. A snake rising from the ground might even symbolize tidal waves or destruction coming from below. But the story doesn't end there. Pillar seems to expand on the same disaster, the one they called the Terror of the Sky. You might see animals fleeing, waves, fire raining down. It paints a vivid picture of the meteor shower. But wait! While Pillars 43 and 56 may encode memories of a past catastrophe, Pillar 18 might be a forecast. That stone zooms in on the Aquarius constellation. If this sounds familiar, maybe it's from the phase Age of Aquarius, which is the age we're living in now. Some enthusiasts believe this may be a warning for us, and may be telling us that a similar meteor shower will hit Earth and thus you and me and us. I mean, chills! But hey, that's the kind of mystery that makes Göbekli Tepe so captivating. Today, archaeologists know that Göbekli Tepe was part of a much larger sacred complex, now known as Taş Tepeler, a network of ancient sites across the region, each with its own secrets and structures, but connected by shared patterns and motifs. In 2019, excavations began at this sister site, just 40 miles from Göbekli Tepe, known as Karahan Tepe. And here's the twist. Some researchers believe Karahan Tepe might be even older. Unlike Göbekli Tepe, which appears to have been primarily ceremonial, Karahan Tepe has signs of domestic structures like walls, tools, and perhaps even homes. And that changes everything. Because whether these sites were the work of highly sophisticated hunter-gatherers or survivors carrying the fragments of a lost pre-Ice Age civilization, one thing becomes clear: our ancestors weren't just surviving. They were planning, tracking, and predicting. They were far more capable, curious, and connected to the universe than we ever gave them credit for.
It looks like there's a terrifying crack in our understanding of the universe. Scientists have compared how fast the universe expands. Two methods, two measurements, completely different answers, and no one knows why. As they dive deeper into this, a new terrifying idea came up. Our entire universe might be spinning. If that's true, it changes everything we know about space, time, and even how the world will end. To understand what's going on, let's talk about how our universe expands. How exactly is it expanding? Into what? We first noticed this about 100 years ago. For many years, people thought the universe was eternal and unchanging. Then came Edwin Hubble. He observed the universe in the telescope and realized the light that came to our planet was coming from galaxies that were moving farther away from us. The galaxies weren't sitting still. The whole universe was moving. And this became one of the most revolutionary discoveries in history. The movement started with the Big Bang. It happened about 13.8 billion years ago. The entire universe, all matter, energy, space, and time burst forth from an incredibly hot, dense point. The bang sent a shockwave, giving all the things and particles their initial boost. That's how they started drifting away from each other. The thing is, they weren't drifting away into open space. No, they created space themselves by drifting. Let's say you're holding a balloon. You draw some dots on it. You start blowing air into it. The balloon gets bigger and bigger. And every dot on its surface moves away from every other dot as the balloon expands. As dots move apart, they basically create space between them by moving away from each other. So the universe isn't expanding into some mysterious space. Space itself exists only within our universe, born between moving dots. The Big Bang boost was so strong that the universe started expanding incredibly fast. It's hard to even imagine. If you were chilling and watching this from the side, it would seem like the entire universe appeared out of nowhere in less than a moment. You wouldn't even hear it because there's no sound in vacuum. There would be nothing. Then you would just blink and bam! The world is everywhere. That bang was so huge that the universe is still expanding from it even now. Even billions of years later, it's space itself that's stretching, with every point on it drifting farther and farther away, including us. We're just moving at a more gentle pace, sort of. So when we figured out everything was expanding, the next question was, how fast? Turns out the movement speed is different for different galaxies. We noticed that the closer things are to us, the slower they drift away from us. And the farther a galaxy is from us, the faster it appears to be moving away. And they're moving constantly. We say, for example, this galaxy is 100 megaparsecs away. But since the galaxies don't actually stay in one place, that means this galaxy is moving at a speed about 4,300 miles per second away from us. If the distance doubles, then the galaxy's speed doubles. So, for example, if a galaxy is 1,000,000 light-years away, it will move away from us at a speed of about 46,000 miles per hour. 2,000,000 light-years away? Double it. Now it's about 92,000 miles per hour. 10 million light-years away? Almost 500,000 miles per hour. Scientists call it Hubble's law. Speed is equal to Hubble constant multiplied by distance, and the Hubble constant is the exact magical speed number that we keep adding up every time we move 1,000,000 light-years farther. So, the Hubble constant is basically the rate at which expansion happens, But there was a problem. A problem that seemed tiny at first, but it was actually hiding a huge disaster. When we measured Hubble constant using two different methods, for some reason, we got different results. The first method was to calculate it based on what we see around us right now, today. Different stars, galaxies, their light and brightness. In certain stars, brightness changes in predictable ways. Huge star booms, like supernovas, act like cosmic lighthouses. We know how bright they should be, and thanks to that, we can calculate their distance and speed. It's all clear and simple. But then, scientists tried something totally different. They often used this trick. To figure out how the early universe behaved and then simulate everything from the start, it's like creating your basic characters in Sims and letting them do whatever, hoping that they'll do things in predictable ways and not pull off something wild. We can guess what the early universe looked like because we can still detect the faint afterglow of the Big Bang. We have ultra-precise telescopes that allow us to find an ancient, very first light and very first traces of energy that were born in our world. This post-Big Bang afterglow is literally filling up the entire universe. It's just scattered around like some dinosaur fossils. So we take these fossils and recreate the entire dinosaur based on them. And when we measured what the Hubble constant should logically be, based on how our universe was starting, we got a different number. It doesn't sound like a big deal at first. Based on what we see today, every 3 million light-years away, things are moving about 40 miles per second faster. But based on how our universe was supposed to develop, the number is about 45 miles per second. Literally just 4 miles or so, right? But in cosmology, it's an ultimate red flag. The error bars have shrunk so much that now this isn't just a meh, probably fine situation. It's a literal tension in measurement. And that's exactly what scientists call it, the Hubble tension. It's a serious difference between two super precise measurements based on very different methods, and both of them seem equally right. Imagine using two ultra-precise clocks to check how fast an athlete runs a distance. And in the end, one of the clocks says 10 seconds, while the other says 11. What in the world does that mean? That's terrifying. The two numbers should match, and since they don't, one of three things must be true. First, maybe one of the measurements is wrong, which is very unlikely because both methods are super reliable. Second, maybe something in our interpretation is wrong, but that's also unlikely since many scientists get the same results and agree that the tension is a real deal. And finally, the scariest option, our entire model of the universe is missing something. That's why scientists are freaking out, and as it turns out, they had a reason to. Recently, a new research team from Hawaii proposed something wild. What if the universe is very slowly rotating? If that's the case, it would be absolutely insane. Here's why. First, if the universe actually rotates, even super slowly, it would mean that the laws of physics might be slightly different depending on where you are or which way you look. That breaks one of our most sacred ideas about physics, that space is the same in all directions. Second, it could mean we've misunderstood the entire cosmic history. Maybe we don't actually know how fast the universe is expanding when it was born, or what dark energy is. That would be a huge disaster. And finally, the most horrifying of all, if it's spinning, then it must spin around something, right? If there's a cosmic axis or rotation, it might suggest a preferred direction. It would be something like cosmic north. We thought there's no special place in the universe, but we might have been wrong. Maybe there's a special place after all. It's like finding out the reality itself has been tilted a tiny bit the whole time, and we just noticed. Right now, we're in an exciting and scary place. Either we'll discover new physics and maybe something about dark energy, or we'll find a subtle error in one of the measurements. Or who knows, maybe something totally unexpected will show up. In any case, solving the Hubble tension could revolutionize our understanding of the universe's origin, structure, and our place in it. Guess the riddle. It's moving at 5 miles per second. It makes one circle around Earth every 90 minutes. Within 24 hours, it sees 16 sunrises and sunsets. It also observes many strange phenomena, like gigantic, bizarre symbols written in a desert. You probably already know what it is. The International Space Station. There are a lot of things we don't notice here on Earth, but if we step back, we'll see some pretty strange stuff happening on the planet. Most often, astronauts notice these mysterious things, and recently, they've seen weird patterns in a deserted area of Tunis. They aren't like fake crop circles that were popular in the early 2000s. You may think these strange hieroglyphs have an unearthly origin. They're quite large. That's how astronauts could see them from space. But why doesn't anyone talk about them on Earth? Do Tunisians know what's going on there? In many movies and in real life, secret organizations hide information about some kind of extraterrestrial things. You might have also noticed that most videos about strange phenomena taken by eyewitnesses have terrible quality, as if the operator is always shooting on an old VHS camera. But in the case of the ISS, everything is different. The mysterious symbols were captured on a 4K camera mounted on board the ISS. And the owner of this camera is Sen Corporation Limited, which provides video streaming from space to individuals and businesses. And do you know what the principle of this company is? They strive to make space data publicly available and useful. Thanks to the high quality of the video and open access, the mystery of extraterrestrial technology has been solved. Do you know what it is? Think for yourself and see other strange phenomena that astronauts have observed. Perhaps the following riddles will lead you to the right answer, but if you fail, you will get the answer at the end of the video. Meet NASA astronaut Matthew Dominic. He likes to take pictures from the ISS and post them on the internet. After 6 months of working in Earth's orbit, he shared a mysterious phenomenon with us. You can see most of Asia from an altitude of about 250 miles. There are flashes of lightning, city lights, and a strange red glow. Dominic admitted that he wasn't sure about its origin. Considering the glow is so visible from such a long distance, this must be something big. Try to guess. Here's a clue. Perhaps squids are guilty of this strange visual effect. But no, it's not a giant glowing kraken. You'll find the answer at the end. The following phenomenon occurred not on Earth, but above it. Take a look at this golden red glow in the atmosphere. The ISS took this photo while flying over the Pacific Ocean, northeast of Papua New Guinea. If you think it's pulverized gold, then you're wrong. This is probably the most difficult puzzle in this video. Do you know anything about chemistry, physics, and astronomy? If not, then you're unlikely to answer this riddle. Wait, you'll get the answer soon. This picture was taken by an ISS astronaut during a flyby over Southeast Asia in 2021. 2 shimmering blue balls of light appeared in the dark and slightly ominous atmosphere of Earth. One was flickering over the Gulf of Thailand, and the other was glowing near the South China Sea. The difficulty in solving this phenomenon lies in the fact that not one, but 2 scientific phenomena are taking place here. Lightning, reflection of moonlight from ice particles, spaceships from another planet? What do you think it is? Do you want to get an answer? Wait a bit. So the first mystery is those strange hieroglyphs in the desert. Do you have any ideas? I must warn you though, the truth about this phenomenon may disappoint you a little. These are not symbols made by an extraterrestrial civilization. These are agricultural patterns. Someone just plowed the land or planted vegetables. It doesn't seem strange from below, but from above, it looks like an unknown language or a cipher. So, the next mystery is the red light. Some internet users said it could have been an erupting volcano. Others suggested that commercial vessels emit a red light to catch squid. Fishers use this color to attract sea creatures. So maybe it was a hunt on the giant squid after all. And one user claimed that those red lights belonged to a giant fishing fleet. And its red light can be seen in the nighttime images taken by some satellites. It's time to deal with the most difficult mystery, the golden red glow. If you understand the atmosphere of our planet and know about the chemical interaction between the elements of the periodic table, then you've probably guessed what it is. If not, then here's a simple answer. A golden red glow appears as sunlight interacts with molecules and atoms in the Earth's atmosphere. Now let's take a closer look at this. Ultraviolet light falls on molecules such as oxygen, ozone, sodium, and nitrogen. Light stimulates these cells, meaning it charges them with energy during the day, causing them to separate and excite the electrons inside. Then, these charged particles collide with each other and release energy. As a result of this process, a mesmerizing glow appears. It's mostly oxygen that gives the red color to this glow. The golden light appears because of sodium particles. Scientists divide this phenomenon into 3 categories: day glow, twilight glow, and night glow. Depending on the illumination of the atmosphere by sunlight and the position of the observer, these lights have unique characteristics. Such a fascinating phenomenon not only shows the visual aesthetics of our planet, but also helps scientists better study the upper atmosphere. And finally, the answer to the 4th riddle. We have 2 blue lights. Both have different natures. Let's deal with the first one. The blue light over the Gulf of Thailand was caused by a thunderstorm. But it's not that simple. If you observe Earth from the ISS, you may not always see lightning flashes during thunderstorms because they're usually hidden by clouds. This time, the photographer from the ISS was lucky. There was a gap in the clouds. Lightning illuminated the surrounding walls of this cloud and produced this blue glowing ring. Do you know that a blue thunderstorm is not the most unusual phenomenon in the sky? Red lightning flashes can appear too. They're called sprites. They occur above clouds during an ordinary lightning strike and extend to a height of up to 10 miles. That's why it's hard for us to see them from the ground. Sprites can also extend upward along the trajectory of a narrow cone, like fans. And at this moment, they can glow with blue light. Another cool phenomenon is called elves. These are giant expanding flashes of light in the shape of a pancake. They can reach thousands of miles across and also appear during thunderstorms. Seeing these pancakes is pretty difficult because they exist for less than 1,000th of a second. But what about the second glow? Things get a little more complicated here. The reason for this blue flash is the moon. It seems to us that our satellite glows by itself at night, but it just reflects the sunlight that falls on it. The light from the moon passes through the atmosphere, and the magic happens. We see a blue sky during the day because the sun's rays get scattered in the atmosphere. It's as if they pass through special filters. The light reflected from the moon is also scattered, passes through these filters, and turns blue. But why don't we see this glow at night? Because it's too weak compared to the daytime glow of the sun. But from a certain angle and at a certain height, this blue moonlight can be seen. Astronauts from the ISS managed to catch this scattering. It's like turning the sky blue, only a smaller version. But why blue? Light consists of different colors, and each of them has its own wavelength. Blue has the shortest wavelength, so it's the easiest to scatter.
So, astronomers have just announced that they might have found signs of possible life on a planet outside our solar system. Wow! This distant world is called K2-18b, and it sits about 124 light-years away in the Leo constellation. So, what life are we talking about? Little green men? Octopus-like tentacled creatures? Well, not exactly. First things first, let's define what life is. It's what distinguishes animals and plants from inorganic matter, like the ability to grow, reproduce, and change. Now, what do we need to support life? If what comes to your mind is water, bingo! Scientists have the feeling that K2-18b might be covered in oceans, and if it's so, it can support tiny forms of life like microbes. A team of researchers from the UK and the US used the James Webb Space Telescope to look at the planet's atmosphere. They found hints of two very special chemicals. On Earth, only living things can produce those, and the living things I'm talking about are mostly tiny ocean plants called phytoplankton. So, basically, this planet might indeed host life in the form of algae. Now, of course, scientists still need more proof before getting too excited. We should keep in mind that it's possible that those chemicals were made by something we don't understand yet, not necessarily by living things. But still. K2-18b is a big boy. It's more than 8 times heavier than Earth and about 2.5 times larger. So what makes it even more interesting is that it's located in the Goldilocks zone around its star. That means it's not too hot and not too cold there, just right for the existence of liquid water, which is highly important for life as we know it. Astronomers study faraway planets like this by watching how their light changes when they pass in front of their star. This allows us to figure out what kinds of gases are in the planet's atmosphere. Back in 2013, the James Webb Space Telescope found methane and carbon dioxide in the atmosphere of the planet. These are carbon-based molecules, and it was the first time they were found on a planet in the habitable zone. Scientists also saw a weak signal of a chemical called DMS, which is mostly made by tiny ocean life here on Earth. So, the researchers pointed the telescope at the planet again a year later using a different tool that could pick up more light details. This time, they found much stronger signs of DMS and some related chemicals. But the problem is the signals aren't strong enough yet. They haven't reached something called the 5 sigma level, a parameter scientists use to confirm discoveries. Plus, even if the DMS really is there, it doesn't automatically equal the existence of life. Scientists once found DMS on a comet, which means that it can be produced without some kind of life taking part in the process. And still, the amount of DMS on K2-18b looks way higher than anything seen on Earth. That's why some astronomers are sure it's coming from something living. K2-18b has been a top pick for what scientists call a Haitian planet. This term means a big, watery world with thick hydrogen atmosphere. It's not the kind of place where extraterrestrial civilizations like in movies would live. But it could be home to tiny life forms, like the microbes that once lived in Earth's oceans billions of years ago. Once again, not everyone agrees on how friendly K2-18b really is for life. Some scientists think planets like this might actually be too close to their stars to hold on to liquid water. K2-18b orbits its star every 33 days, which is pretty fast, and could mean it's too hot. That's why some experts claim that even if the planet has any water at all, it might be boiling. Or maybe it's not water, but oceans of lava. But most scientists agree on one thing: we should wait and see. With just 16 to 24 more hours of telescope time, astronomers could confirm what they've seen. This could happen in the next few years. And even if it turns out K2-18b isn't the world we're looking for, we're still getting close. With powerful telescopes like James Webb and more coming in the future, we might be able to answer whether we're alone in the universe or not. At the same time, some places in our own solar system, like Mars, Venus, or Saturn's moon Enceladus, might actually have a better shot at hosting life. Or we could keep exploring other promising worlds, like Proxima Centauri b, which is the closest exoplanet we know about. It's just 4.25 light-years away from us and orbits a small star called Proxima Centauri, right in the habitable zone. This planet is a bit bigger than Earth, which makes it a super-Earth. That's what we call exoplanets larger than ours, but much smaller than gas giants like Neptune or Jupiter. Proxima Centauri b is a fast-moving world. It needs a mere 11 days to go all the way around its star. Scientists think Proxima Centauri b might have a rocky surface, and that's a good sign for possible life. On the other hand, its star blasts it with a lot of ultraviolet radiation. It might have already destroyed the planet's atmosphere, if there was any to begin with. So there's a big question mark when it comes to this world's habitability. Then we've got TRAPPIST-1e, another promising Earth-like planet. It's one of 7 rocky planets orbiting a small, cool star called TRAPPIST-1, about 39 light-years away. Discovered in 2017, it might be one of the most promising places to look for life beyond Earth. This planet is actually a bit smaller than Earth, with a mass around one-half that of our planet. It completes an orbit around its star in just 6 days, which is super fast compared to Earth's 365 days. The planet's size and density suggest it has a rocky surface, and that's another key factor when we talk about habitability. Even though TRAPPIST-1e is very close to its star, the star is quite dim and cool, so the planet might still have a stable Earth-like climate. Some scientists even think it could have more water than Earth. Let's move on to Kepler-186f, located about 500 light-years away. It was the first Earth-sized planet found in a habitable zone of another star. It orbits a red dwarf, which burns cooler and lives much longer than our Sun. This means Kepler-186f could have stable conditions for billions of years, giving life plenty of time to possibly form and evolve. The planet gets only about 1/3 of the sunlight Earth receives, so it would likely be cooler but still warm enough to keep water from freezing. It also seems to be a rocky planet just like Earth, which boosts its chance of hosting life. Now, how about visiting LHS 1140b, about 40 light-years away? This planet has about 5.5 times the mass of Earth. Scientists think it's rocky and possibly has a thick atmosphere, which is a big deal. An atmosphere like that can trap heat, keep temperature stable, and protect water from escaping into space. This world orbits a quiet red dwarf star, so it's not constantly blasted by harmful flares like some other exoplanets are. Some studies even suggest LHS 1140b could be an ocean world with lots of water. So it's one of the more exciting planets we've found in our neighborhood. And finally, we have Gliese 12b. Astronomers call it Exovenus. It sits 40 light-years away from Earth. This world is about the size of Venus and orbits a cool red dwarf star. It needs just under 13 days to complete one orbit. The temperature on the planet is around 107 degrees, which is quite warm but still okay for life. The thing that makes Gliese 12b so interesting is that it could help us understand how Earth-sized planets around cool stars hold on to their atmospheres. That's important because an atmosphere is crucial for things like liquid water and protecting life from harmful radiation. According to some researchers, Gliese 12b is one of the best chances we have to figure out whether planets like this can stay habitable. Hey, can you lift a truck with your hands? No? Shocker. But let me introduce you to nature's original strongman, the ocean, which casually tossed 700-ton boulders around like they were pebbles during a mega tsunami that hit Africa thousands of years ago. This wasn't just a bad day at the beach. This mega tsunami was so powerful, it made the 2004 Indonesian and 2011 Japanese tsunamis look like kiddie pool splashes. Now, to give you an idea of how terrifying regular tsunamis already are, the Japan tsunami produced waves 133 feet tall. The Indian Ocean tsunami was slightly smaller, but it took over 200,000 lives across many countries. Now imagine something way worse. You see, for a long time, scientists thought waves that big were just science fiction. But then they found these enormous boulders, massive chunks of rock, flung far inland, and did the math. It turns out only waves around 800 feet tall could have pulled off that kind of rocky vandalism. And the culprit? A volcano that literally fell apart into the ocean and triggered one of the most powerful tsunamis Earth has ever seen. Usually, tsunamis are blamed on underwater earthquakes, tectonic plates getting into slap fights. But volcanoes? Oh, they've got tsunami potential too. In 1883, for example, a volcano in Indonesia named Krakatoa erupted for 6 months non-stop until it exploded, and the explosion was heard all the way in Australia. This triggered many tsunamis, some almost 100 feet tall. Still, that was more like a toe dip compared to the full cannonball from the mega tsunami. Back in ancient times, the volcano that crumbled during the mega tsunami was huge, and it didn't just fall apart. It lost a chunk that was 10 times the size of Mount Everest. 10 Mount Everests. It was like the Earth wanted to see what would happen if we threw a mountain into the ocean just for fun. It was so massive that when the entire side of the volcano belly flopped into the Atlantic, It created waves that could cover the Statue of Liberty 3 times. It also destroyed an island more than 30 miles away. The volcano behind this real-life Michael Bay scene was called Fogo, located on, you guessed it, Fogo Island. This island is basically just a whole single volcano that rose from the sea thanks to a magma hotspot, a place in the ocean where a lot of magma escapes and erupts like an underwater volcano. Over time, this magma cooled and stacked up like pancakes until, voila, after 7 major eruptions, the island popped out of the ocean like it was playing peekaboo. Surprise, it's a volcano. But Fogo's dramatic entrance was also a ticking time bomb. You see, the more a volcano grows, the heavier it gets, and if there's not enough magma inside it to support it, the whole thing can just collapse. Sometimes it doesn't take much. A minor earthquake, some erosion, or just a poor foundation made of soft sediment can trigger a collapse. It's like a really tall guy trying to balance over a bunch of marbles. Fogo had all the bad luck ingredients: too tall, too heavy, and built on squishy ground. And it gets worse. As the volcano grows heavier, it starts squishing the magma underneath. That lava can't rise, so it just simmers down there, slowly thickening like soup left on a burner for too long. Gases build up, pressure increases, and eventually, kaboom! It's the volcanic version of eating too many burritos and then trying to hold in a sneeze. This massive pressure and imbalance can trigger what's called a flank collapse, which is science speak for oops, half the volcano just fell into the ocean. That's what happened with Fogo. Most of the volcanic islands that form this way are long gone, but Fogo is still very much alive and kicking. In fact, it last erupted in 2014, and considering that it goes off every 20 years, maybe don't travel to Fogo Island in around 2034. For the longest time, scientists believe only big, bulky volcanic islands could collapse like this. But new research says that even smaller, skinnier guys, like the Danny DeVitos of the island world, aren't safe either. The thing is that small volcanic islands only seem stable because of their small mass. It's like Danny DeVito and Arnold Schwarzenegger both slipping on the ice. Arnie's fall might cause more chaos, but Danny can still go flying. And those little collapses? Yes, they matter. Take Santa Maria, a tiny island that's about 170 times smaller than Hawaii. It has collapsed multiple times, not because it wanted to, but because it's basically standing on soggy breadcrumbs. Its foundation is loose marine sediment, and to make things worse, it's sitting right next to the East Azores Fault, where 3 tectonic plates meet up for daily slap fights. This fault is responsible for many earthquakes and even some tsunamis that happened in Lisbon in the past, so you can imagine what it's like living right above it. Every time the volcano in Santa Maria erupts and grows, it also sinks. But when a chunk collapses, it bounces back up like a buoy. This seamount to island again roller coaster means that Santa Maria has popped in and out of the ocean like a submarine playing peekaboo. And with every peak comes a potential tsunami. Another volcano with similar trust issues is Pacaya, located in Guatemala. Between 2011 and 2013, scientists spotted strange movements in the soil, tiny shifts that suggested something underneath was getting restless. Sure enough, in 2014, Pacaya erupted. Luckily, it didn't collapse, but that risk still looms, especially if magma gets trapped in it like it did with Fogo. The consequences could be explosive, literally. In fact, about 1,000 years ago, Pacaya experienced a collapse that sent debris avalanches more than 15 miles away. Since then, it's rebuilt itself like a fiery phoenix, but it could still crumble again. That's why volcanologists obsess over the tiniest wobbles. It's not paranoia if the mountain really might fall. Now you might be thinking here, okay, but that was the past. Surely that kind of ridiculous mega tsunami collapse can't happen again, right? Well, welcome to the 21st century. Islands like Hawaii, La Palma in Spain, and various parts of the Caribbean are sitting on the same kind of geological whoopee cushions. All it takes is the right combo: loose foundation, steep slopes, maybe some trapped magma, and boom, flank collapse. In fact, it's already happened recently. In 2018, Anak Krakatau, the volcanic baby of the infamous Krakatoa, lost a big chunk of itself during an eruption. It caused a tsunami, but it was more awkward than devastating, like a volcano losing its pants on stage. Embarrassing, but survivable. But that's just amateur hour compared to history's real showstoppers. Ritter Island's 1888 collapse was so intense that the island literally got shorter. It went from being more than 2,000 feet tall to a mere 460 feet. But the record holder is the legendary Latua Bay megasplash from 1958, where a 7.8 magnitude earthquake triggered a massive landslide that sent a wave taller than the Empire State Building roaring through Alaska at highway speeds. Strangely enough, only 5 people lost their lives here, but on the other hand, the destruction path it left behind can still be seen today, all the way from space. Melting glaciers and ice caps can make volcanoes collapse too. When they melt, there's a sudden decrease in pressure on Earth's crust that can destabilize entire volcanoes. It's called isostatic rebound. It's like suddenly yanking a chair out from under someone who's been sitting still for centuries. Whoops. Also, here's something you probably never thought you'd worry about on your island getaway. Some volcanic islands grow outward as lava pours into the sea, creating unstable platforms known as lava deltas. These deltas can collapse without warning, taking newly formed land, and sometimes tourists too, right back into the ocean. No pressure though, just thought, maybe you want to stay off steaming new land. So yeah, next time you're lounging on a beachy volcanic island thinking, wow, this place is paradise. Just remember, it might also be a ticking geological time bomb with a flair for the dramatic. From ancient mountain-sized cannonballs to surprise lava deltas, volcanoes have a history of keeping things spicy.
In Asia, there's a bridge that is way longer than you'd think should even be possible. The HZMB stretches 34 miles over open water, which makes it the longest sea bridge in the world. So if something this massive can make it across rough waters, why can't New Zealand just build a bridge between its 2 main islands? After all, we're talking about a distance of just 14 miles. And a bridge like that could seriously change life for both locals and tourists. People could just hop in a car and drive from Wellington to Picton. No more ferry hassles, no more drawn-out trips. Just one epic road journey with ocean views on both sides. So what's stopping them? Well, turns out, everything. I mean, building a bridge there is technically possible, but there are a couple reasons why experts are like, maybe not. Let's start with the obvious, the distance. The North Island and the South Island are separated by Cook Strait. Like I said, it's 14 miles wide at its narrowest point. That's not much, true. Plus, we've got the HZMB bridge, proving that, yep, it is technically possible to build a bridge over the sea to cover that distance. But we can't ignore the fact that New Zealand's geography is, well, a whole different ballgame. Cook Strait isn't exactly a calm, friendly stretch of water. It's deep, really deep. Parts of it drop to about 10,000 feet. That's like stacking 7 Empire State Buildings on top of each other. It's also a rough, moody stretch of ocean that loves tossing around ships like rubber ducks. In fact, quite a few have been wrecked in Cook Strait. And sadly, many lives were lost. You don't have to worry about it so much though, as the worst accidents happened a long time ago. The ships and ferries that cross it today are much safer. Even so, it'd be pretty hard to avoid getting seasick while crossing it. Things get even messier below the surface. The seafloor over there is uneven and unpredictable. What happens is that Cook Strait has opposing tides at each end, one where it meets the Tasman Sea and the other where it joins the Pacific Ocean. And they simply don't move together like you might expect. When the tide is high on one side, it's low on the other, and they're totally out of sync. So all that water rushes back and forth through the strait to balance things out, creating some really strong and messy currents in the middle. Then there's the weather. Cook Strait isn't just windy, it's probably one of the windiest places in the southern hemisphere. That's because it's located right in the middle of one of New Zealand's 3 big wind tunnels. Basically, there are places where the wind doesn't just come and go quickly. It sticks around, blowing hard for most of the year. And all of this happens because of something called the Roaring Forties. That's the name for the latitude band between 40 and 50 degrees south of the equator, where strong, persistent westerly winds are pretty common. Unlike the northern hemisphere, which has a lot of land at this latitude, the southern hemisphere is mostly ocean with just a few land masses, like New Zealand's South Island, Tasmania, and the southern tip of South America. So, these winds go wild because there's nothing to slow them down, and they just keep picking up speed. The gusts there can reach up to 150 miles per hour. So, imagine trying to cross a bridge in a car when the wind is actively pushing against you. That's not just unpleasant, it's super dangerous. Drivers can easily lose control of their cars with the wind pushing them sideways, and of course, that can lead to countless serious accidents. Now, let's talk about earthquakes. New Zealand sits right on the boundary of 2 massive tectonic plates, the Indo-Australian and Pacific plates. It's basically in the middle of a collision zone, and about 14,000 earthquakes happen in and around the country every year. Of those, only about 200 are big enough to be felt. Still, building a massive bridge under these conditions would require some serious genius-level engineering. With all that in mind, we can safely say that the whole bridge idea is off the table. But how about an underwater tunnel? Yep, that could work. It could be a great solution actually. No wind, no bad weather, and no earthquakes to deal with. There are a bunch of other advantages too. First, it would dramatically reduce travel time, cutting down the 3 to 4 hour sailing trip between the North and South Islands. That same journey would probably only take about 40 minutes. Then people wouldn't have to stress about all the ferry cancellations and delays because of bad weather. And most importantly, it's doable. I mean, look at the Channel Tunnel. It's an undersea tunnel connecting southern England and northern France. Japan did something similar with the Seikan Tunnel, which connects the islands of Honshu and Hokkaido. They are both huge projects, serving pretty much the same purpose. So why on earth isn't New Zealand already building this tunnel? Well, for the same reason we don't all live in luxury treehouses with personal robots: money. Estimates vary, but some experts think a project like this could cost anywhere from $10 to $20 billion. To cover that kind of cost, they'd probably need to charge tolls for the next 100 years. And trust me, those tolls wouldn't be cheap. Other experts think it could actually cost more than that. Because you see, we have to consider all the extra infrastructure. The narrowest point of Cook Strait is between the North Island and Arapawa Island. That's one of the long, mountainous regions in the Marlborough Sounds, which is pretty remote. So it's not just about the cost of the bridge or tunnel itself, it's also the access roads, safety systems, maintenance, and evacuation plans. You can't just build a huge underwater tunnel and not plan for the occasional emergencies. And what would it actually be used for? Sure, there are people who travel between the islands. About 1 million passengers take the ferry every year. But that's not exactly the kind of traffic that justifies the most expensive infrastructure project in the country's history. Earlier, we talked about how England and Japan have similar underwater tunnels. But there's something to consider. The United Kingdom has a population of 69 million. Japan has even more, with around 123 million people. And in New Zealand, they've only got 5 million residents to pay for this project. So could they have a tunnel under Cook Strait? Sure they could. Should they? Probably not. If you don't want to fly, the only other way to travel between the islands is by ferry. It's not ideal, but hey, it works. New Zealand has a total of 5 ships that transport people and vehicles across the islands. For tourists who aren't in a rush, it's perfect. You can cross the islands while taking in some of the most stunning views and spotting amazing wildlife. You'll start your trip in Wellington, and right from there, you'll see the rugged North Island coastline as you head out into open water. You might see different seabirds like gulls and terns, and as you get closer to the South Island, you might spot some gannets. If you're lucky, you could also catch a glimpse of the seal colonies off the coast. During the last hour of the trip, the ferry will slow down, giving you plenty of time to enjoy the green hills and calm waters. You will also approach Queen Charlotte Sound, a spot known for its wildlife. So keep an eye out for orcas, playful dolphins, and even penguins. Honestly, having a ferry instead of a tunnel might not be so bad after all.
Well, a biotech company called Colossal just announced something wild. They say they've brought back a direwolf from extinction. But did they really? What they've really done is way stranger, and maybe even more important. Their team has just created a brand new predator. Not a clone, not a revival, but a new species. These cute cubs are built from gene-edited wolves, shaped by ancient DNA and born through cutting-edge biotech. So wait, are the Jurassic Park horrors coming for us? Well, let's see. Now, direwolf was the massive muscular predator that roamed North America thousands of years ago. Most people think these were just some sort of bigger gray wolves, but don't be tricked by appearances and the name. In 2021, a landmark study came out. A team of researchers in major institutions studied actual direwolf DNA and discovered something shocking. These guys weren't just big gray wolves, not even close. They were separate animals. Genetically, direwolves split off from wolves roughly 6 million years ago. Just to put that in perspective, humans and chimps split about 6 to 7 million years ago. So direwolves and gray wolves are as different from each other as we are from chimpanzees. They look similar because of the so-called convergent evolution, when two species evolve similar traits because they live in similar environments. Think of sharks and dolphins, both streamlined, both predators, both ocean hunters, but different animals, and dolphins are way cuter. So Colossal said that they revived this animal, a dramatic and bold claim. But it's not quite true. In reality, they genetically engineered a new kind of wolf. It's not a direwolf, it's not even a known species. It's a synthetic animal, one that's never existed before. And this is a massive deal, both incredible and terrifying. The company basically has taken gray wolves and modified their genes by mixing them up with some direwolf DNA they found. Which is kind of wild, because, as we said, these two animals aren't really relatives, they're completely different species. The Colossal company kind of ignored that, though. They say the gray wolf is the closest living relative to a direwolf, and that the data proves it. But what data? They haven't shown it so far, it's just a claim. Why are they even calling this a direwolf? Well, they're saying their cubs are close enough to a direwolf and maybe fill the same role in an ecosystem. Basically, if it behaves like a direwolf, walks like a direwolf, and preys like a direwolf, doesn't that count? Sounds kinda dire to me. Well, if we're being honest with words, then not really. Biologically, genetically, evolutionarily, this is now a modified gray wolf. So, how good or bad is it? Let's figure it out. The good part is that the research like this might help us restore the planet's ecosystem and ecology. Colossal and similar teams are trying to develop technologies that could be used for especially important causes. We don't notice it in daily life, but species are quietly, constantly disappearing. Scientists estimate that over 1 million species are at risk right now. When ecosystems lose a species, especially because of humanity's actions, it's like pulling out a block of a Jenga tower. Too many missing blocks, and the whole thing wobbles. But Colossal believes that if we can't bring the exact block back, we can create one that fits closely enough to stabilize the structure. For example, they've also worked on cloning red wolf-coyote hybrids. This might help repopulate U.S. ecosystems where red wolves once thrived. All the tools these scientists invented might even help with currently endangered species. Another genuinely mind-blowing part is that scientists working with Colossal found real, usable DNA from direwolves. That alone is a massive achievement. We do have direwolf fossils, tons of them from the La Brea tar pits. Hey, don't stick your toe in there. But those fossils are soaked in tar. Because of that, their DNA is usually ruined. But the team managed to find some direwolf bones that are over 12,000 years old. These specimens gave researchers enough material to begin building a direwolf genome. Not a full one, but a basic blueprint. Even if we ignore the wild new species part, this achievement is still huge because it'll help us study the extinct direwolves in more detail. We might now learn more about this animal than we ever did before. It's literally molecular archaeology. Now, all this is great, up to a point. The controversial part is, of course, the Jurassic Park one. We're not just preserving species anymore. We're starting to pull some shenanigans with them. Of course, this immediately raised tons of concerns. Both regular people and scientists are now debating heavily about this and show a lot of skepticism. Another problem is that actual ecosystems are way more complex than Jenga puzzle pieces. They're full of moving parts, millions of them, all adjusting to each other constantly. So, if you throw a new type of wolf into the mix, it won't react exactly the way a dire wolf once did. The times have changed, the ecosystem has changed, the extinction happened, nature adjusted, and throwing these cubs into the wild now might be even more destabilizing. That's why these new wolves aren't being released into the wild. They won't be hunting bison or roaming ancient grasslands. That world is long gone. Their prey is gone. Their ecosystem is gone. Instead, they'll stay to live in the lab. But if we do start to put our own animals into the ecosystem one day, what happens when ecosystems start depending on human-made species to survive? Well, it's like I always say, it's nearly impossible to science your way out of a situation that you behaved yourself into. If you can't change the behavior, the science might only be flashy and not the solution. Anyway, all these are hard and important questions. For now, we might at least exhale with relief that no one is bringing the dinosaurs back. Yeah. DNA doesn't survive more than 1.5 million years, and dinosaur fossils are stone now, not cells. You can't clone from stone. But what about animals that vanished more recently? Creatures that once lived during the Ice Age, or even just a century ago? Those are within reach. The most famous example is the woolly mammoth. These shaggy giants once stomped across the tundras of the north, shaping nature by knocking down trees, flattening snow, and fertilizing soil. Their disappearance helped turn thriving grasslands into mossy, carbon-trapping bogs. Now scientists want to take preserved mammoth DNA from frozen remains, compare it with elephant DNA, identify the key differences, and create a new hybrid. Kind of the same thing we did with these new dire wolf cubs. It would be a cold-resistant, tundra-stomping, woolly-coated mammoth elephant. Like that. These guys would be close enough to fill the ecological niche that mammoths once held. Then there's also the passenger pigeon. Once the most abundant bird in North America, flocks so massive they could block out the sun, but we hunted them to extinction by the early 1900s. The last one, named Martha, passed away in a zoo in 1914. But we have her DNA preserved in museum samples, and today, using AI and genomics, scientists are working to recreate a living bird that behaves like a passenger pigeon. These birds could help regenerate forests, spread seeds, and restore a part of the lost sky. And finally, the Tasmanian tiger, a striped wolf-like marsupial that once roamed Australia. It was hunted to extinction in the 20th century. But its DNA is abundant. Museums collected pelts, fossils, and even preserved pups. This one was a keystone species, a stabilizer, a hunter that helped keep ecosystems in check. So they want to restore this one as well. The idea is to bring back extinct species using artificial intelligence, genetic sequencing, and the rapidly growing toolbox of biotech. But all this has to be done very carefully. Otherwise, the species could destabilize the environment instead of helping it. Now, on the good side, even if we never bring a mammoth back, this research is already saving lives. For example, the northern white rhino. There are only 5 left, and only 1 male among them. Extinction is practically written into their future. But using preserved cells and cloning techniques, scientists are working on rebuilding the population. In any case, it looks like we're entering a new era of biology, and this discovery is going to start a conversation that will be going on for decades.
Name a desert. Let me guess. Sahara? Well, actually, no matter which one you thought of, I'm sure of one thing. It's located somewhere below this line. See, when we hear the word deserts, we usually picture dry, sandy, blazing hot places, and there's not a single one of those above 45 degrees north latitude or below 45 degrees south. In the south, that kind of makes sense. I mean, if you leave out Antarctica, there's not a whole lot of land down there. But things are different above 45 degrees north. There are tons of land. Countries like Canada, France, the United Kingdom, and a bunch of others. And still, not a single desert. Actually, not a hot desert. Most of the major hot deserts are up in the northern hemisphere, near the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn. And the hottest ones are usually found between 15 and 30 degrees north or south of the equator. Just like the Sahara, where average high temperatures can reach up to 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Together, hot deserts cover almost 15% of the Earth's land area. But if our planet is packed with them, why doesn't a single one appear above this line? I mean, the 45 degrees north latitude. I'll explain. Let's divide Earth into 5 main zones. The polar regions are located at both ends, north and south. Right here, we have the 2 temperate zones. And finally, right in the middle of the globe is the tropical zone. Now, the line we're talking about sits in the temperate zone, in a colder area. Because the farther you go away from the equator, the colder it gets. Actually, the average annual temperature drops about 1.2 degrees Fahrenheit for every degree of latitude you move north in the northern hemisphere. And cold weather is the main reason hot deserts don't form above this line. It turns out that as you move farther north from the equator, the sun's rays hit the Earth at a more slanted angle. That spreads the solar energy over a larger area, which means less heat is concentrated in one spot. Basically, these regions just don't get as hot. And it's one of the reasons why countries like Finland are much colder than Colombia, for example. Another reason temperatures are lower in this zone has to do with something called albedo. Basically, this term refers to the amount of sunlight that a surface reflects back. Let me give you an example. Every surface on Earth both reflects and absorbs sunlight, but in different amounts. Take snow, for example. It can reflect up to 90% of the sunlight that hits it and only absorbs about 10%. That's what gives snow a high albedo. And it's totally different with sand, which has a lower albedo. In places like the Kalahari Desert, down in southern Africa, it's about a 50-50 situation. Most of the year, roughly 50% of the sunlight gets reflected around there, and the other 50% is absorbed. The heat absorbed by the sand is part of why it gets so hot in dry places like deserts. I mean, hot deserts. Simply put, sand soaks up more heat, while snow reflects most of it. This is one of the reasons why snowy areas stay much cooler. So the closer you get to the polar zones, the easier it is for sunlight to be reflected instead of absorbed. And that helps explain why there aren't any hot deserts around those parts. Then, we also have atmospheric patterns. Let's just say that the air patterns change a lot once you go above that 45-degree line. That's because this region is controlled by a wind belt known as the Ferrel Cell. Okay, so Earth has 3 main convection cells. You can think of them as big loops of moving air. Warm air rises, cools down, sinks, and then the cycle repeats. At the top and bottom of the planet, we have the polar cells. Right in the middle are the Hadley cells, and sandwiched between those two are the Ferrel cells. Now, everything that happens between these 3 cells can get a little complicated, but for today, the main thing to know is this. In those middle zones, the warm air that comes from the tropics meets the cold air from the polar regions. So, Ferrel cells play a big role in moving heat from the equator up toward the poles. This flow of warm air helps smooth out the temperature differences between the tropics and the polar regions. And that's what shapes the weather in places like North America, Europe, and parts of Asia. In the mid-latitudes, the Ferrel cell keeps the air moving around so much that hot, dry air doesn't really get a chance to settle. So, those regions end up with more moisture, more clouds, and even storms, rather than dry, desert-like weather. That's why you don't usually see hot deserts around 45 degrees latitude. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that the ferrocell makes the weather less stable. And that's very different from what happens in the Sahara Desert, for example. Over there, temperatures don't change all that much throughout the year. Just expect it to be hot. When you put all these factors together, it helps explain why hot deserts are mostly limited to the middle parts of the Earth, and why you'll never find a Sahara or Kalahari-style desert in places like Canada or Sweden. But that doesn't mean we don't have any deserts above the 45-degree line. Turns out, deserts don't always have to be hot and sandy. In fact, they can look like this. Yep, I'm talking about the Arctic. Because the actual definition of a desert isn't just some hot, dry, sandy place, it's really any area that gets very little precipitation. In other words, an area where it doesn't rain much. And it usually gets no more than 10 inches of precipitation per year. So no matter if the weather is hot or cold, deserts are really dry places with hardly any vegetation around. That makes it pretty tough for animals and plants to live in those environments. If you think about it, that means the biggest desert on Earth is Antarctica. It covers about 5.5 million square miles, just endless ice flats as far as the eye can see. It's also the coldest desert on the planet, even colder than the Arctic, which is the other polar desert. Temperatures there can drop as low as minus 128.2 degrees Fahrenheit. If you look at the Earth, about 33% of its land is desert. Now, pay close attention to the ones located between 15 and 30 degrees latitude. These are called tropical deserts. But can you notice something curious about their locations? Most of them are found on the western edges of continents. And there's a reason for that. Actually, 4 main reasons. First, the winds that bring rain usually blow from the east. When they move across the land, they drop most of the rain early on. By the time these winds reach the west side, they're dry, so there's no rain left for those areas. That already makes things pretty dry. Second, in the western margins of continents, the air usually goes down instead of up. When air goes down, it gets warmer and can't form clouds, so again, no rain. Third, if there are mountains nearby, they can block the rain too. One side of the mountain gets all the moisture, and the other side, called the rain shadow, stays dry. And lastly, the ocean near these places often has cold water. Cold water cools the air above it and makes it calm, so clouds don't form easily. No clouds means no rain. So when you put all of that together, it helps explain why those tropical deserts seem to prefer one side of the continent more than the other. If you're scared of spiders, never ever visit Mars. In March 2025, NASA's Perseverance rover found something looking like a bunch of tiny spider eggs on the surface of the red planet. This something is made up of hundreds of little round balls stuck together. What if all these eggs hatch? Will hordes of 8-legged creatures swarm the red planet? Doubtful. The thing found by Perseverance was just sitting there on a hill called Witch Hazel, near the edge of Jezero crater. On closer inspection, it turned out to be a weirdly shaped rock with a bit of Martian dust on it. Yeah, sadly, or luckily, those weren't Martian spider eggs. Even so, the formation really stood out from everything else around it. The Perseverance team named the weird rock St. Paul's Bay. It's what scientists call a float rock. This term means that it didn't form where it was found, but somehow got moved there. So, at the moment, we don't have enough clues to figure out its background and how it got that strange texture. But that's not the only mystery. Something had to move this rock from its original spot. One theory claims that the rock could have been created when a meteorite smashed into Mars. The powerful impact must have blasted rocks into the air, and those bits could have cooled down and formed the tiny balls we see now. If that's true, this rock might have come from really far away, and it could give us new info on how big impacts move stuff around on the red planet. NASA thinks the rock might have just rolled down Witch Hazel Hill. It could have come from one of the darker layers up on the hill. We have seen those layers from space. Now, the goal is to study Witch Hazel Hill more closely and find out if those layers are made of the same stuff as the St. Paul's Bay rock. If so, it might mean a few things. Maybe there was volcanic activity in that region, or a big meteor hit, or there might have been groundwater there in the past. If this theory turns out to be true, there's a chance that some of those rocks might hold tiny fossils from ancient microbes. That's why NASA is planning to bring some of the rocks back to Earth in the 2030s with the Mars Sample Return mission. We'll get to study them up close and maybe, just maybe, find signs of ancient Martian life. Now, the funniest thing about it all is that it isn't the first time scientists have dealt with arachnids on Mars. Spiders on Mars is actually the nickname for a weird-looking surface feature. In certain places on Mars, you can see big dark cracks that spread out like spider legs. Some are huge, over 3,000 feet wide. From above, they seriously look like a bunch of creepy crawlers moving across the planet. These spooky shapes were first spotted by Mars orbiters in 2003, and they've been showing up in satellite photos ever since. At first, no one had a clue what they were, but now, scientists think they form when carbon dioxide ice, dry ice, sitting on the surface, suddenly turns straight into gas. That fast change causes gas to shoot through the ice and carve out all those strange crackly patterns. An even cooler thing is that NASA scientists have been able to recreate those Mars spiders in the lab here on Earth. They built a special setup mimicking Mars's surface and watched tiny versions of the spiders form right in front of their eyes. The team had been trying to recreate those Mars spiders for 5 years. When it finally happened, they were overjoyed. Back in 2021, scientists managed to explain how those spider-like marks form on Mars using something called the Kiefer model. The basic idea is that in spring, sunlight shines through big, clear chunks of frozen carbon dioxide, aka dry ice. That heats the Martian ground underneath, and the ice starts turning straight into gas. The gas builds up under the ice, and when the pressure gets too intense, boom, the ice cracks. Gas shoots out, dragging dark sand and dust with it, leaving behind those spooky spider patterns once the ice melts in summer. The team tested this theory using a big special chamber nicknamed Dusty. Yeah, that's a real name. It's about the size of a barrel and can recreate the freezing cold, super low pressure conditions on Mars. We're talking about -301 degrees Fahrenheit. The researchers also put fake Martian soil in the chamber and covered it with CO2 ice. Then they used a lamp underneath the soil to heat it up, just like the sun heats up Mars. Their experiments worked, and little spider shapes formed just like they do on the red planet. The study also revealed something new. The team found that ice formed inside the ground too, and it caused the soil to crack along with the ice. This might explain why the spider's legs are so zigzagged instead of straight, like we might expect. Next, they want to keep doing experiments to figure out more about the Martian spiders, like why they only show up in some places on Mars and why they aren't getting more common over time. The red planet is apparently set on playing tricks on people from Earth. For example, in April 2023, NASA's Curiosity rover took a little break from searching for signs of ancient water on Mars and stumbled upon something curious: a travel book. Later, scientists realized that it wasn't really a book, just a rock. But it does look like a little hardcover with a page frozen mid-turn. This book rock is tiny, measuring only about 1 inch wide. So it might not hold any ancient Martian stories, but at least it's travel size. Then in January 2023, the University of Arizona shared another bizarre image. A rock formation that looked like the face of a giant teddy bear. It had 2 distinct beady eyes, a button nose, and an upturned mouth. It was captured by NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, which was orbiting the red planet at the time. Scientists from the University of Arizona explained that the teddy bear face was likely just a natural formation, like a broken-up hill or mound in the center of an ancient crater. Another cool find occurred in February 2022. The Curiosity rover spotted something that could only be described as a tiny flower made of minerals. It looks like little coral branches, but it's actually a mineral deposit, which is pretty rare to see in a flower-like shape. Most of these kinds of deposits are formed when ancient water mixes with rocks on the Martian surface, so they're not exactly new to scientists. But this one is unique, since it looks like a tiny plant or flower. Now, the next discovery is even wilder. Once, the Curiosity rover snapped a pic of what looked like a perfect doorway in a Martian cliff. Naturally, people started wondering if it was some kind of secret entrance or maybe a hidden base for astronauts. But in reality, it's just a really cool rock formation. Winds and erosion carved away at the rock over time, creating a perfect symmetrical shape. Going even deeper into the past, back in 2018, a researcher noticed weird stick-like shapes in an image and thought they looked like fossilized animal footprints. Unfortunately, NASA quickly shot down the idea. Those tracks turned out to be salt deposits that formed in areas where water evaporated. You can find something similar on Earth too, for example, in dry lake beds. So, while it's pretty interesting that there's more proof that Mars used to have rivers and lakes, these tracks aren't evidence of life, just a quirky rock formation. Now, the next find is absolutely amazing. NASA's Opportunity rover found round, blueberry-like rocks on Mars back in 2004. But those aren't the kind you eat with your cereal. The blueberries you're looking at are made of iron, and they're evidence that Mars used to have a lot of water. Over billions of years, water smoothed them out and created these little balls. Scientists think that they formed when Mars was much wetter than it is now. The iron-rich blueberries are a pretty big deal because they show that Mars could have been a very different place a long time ago.
Okay, it's pop quiz time. What's the strongest river in the world? The Amazon? Pfft, rookie guess. No, really. The mightiest river isn't on land at all. It's underwater and is called the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, or ACC for friends. This beast flows with a force 100 times stronger than the Amazon River, and it could power over 100,000 hydroelectric plants. That's enough electricity to light up entire continents. But this underwater juggernaut doesn't just flex its muscles for fun. It's the planet's ultimate multitasker. The ACC is Earth's thermostat, carbon vacuum, climate stabilizer, and oceanic superhighway all rolled into one. But here's the not-so-fun part. Scientists have spotted a serious red flag. The ACC is slowing down, and not just by a little bit. We're talking up to 20% weaker by 2050. If this trend continues, we're looking at climate chaos that could make your worst Monday feel like a day at the spa. So, maybe time to panic a little? Well, hold on. So what is the ACC anyways? To learn more about it, we need to dive deep into the ocean, figuratively. The Antarctic Circumpolar Current is the only ocean current that flows all the way around the planet, hugging the cold continent of Antarctica like a belt of water. Unlike other currents that get tripped up by continents, the ACC has a clear racetrack, nothing but open ocean, so it flows uninterrupted through the Drake Passage between South America and Antarctica. It moves an astonishing 3.6 billion cubic feet of water per second. That's so much water we couldn't find anything to compare it to, sorry. The ACC is driven by ferocious westerly winds, moving eastward to connect the Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian Oceans into one continuous supercurrent. It also plunges into abyssal depths, connecting shallow, intermediate, and deep waters into one giant, swirling blender of oceanic energy. Now, to put it simply, it may be too late for that, but I'll try. The ACC is the glue that is keeping all of our planet together. It plays a starring role in the thermohaline circulation, or global conveyor belt, if you don't want to sound lame. This is the system that redistributes heat, carbon, and nutrients around the globe. To make it all work, the ACC pushes nutrient-rich deep water to the surface in a process called upwelling, feeding plankton, krill, whales, and eventually sushi on your plate. That means if you love seafood or care about ocean food chains at all, you should really start paying attention. Without this nutrient cycling, marine life from the bottom to the top of the food web suffers. Now, here's the cool part. While it's busy playing waiter to the sea, the ACC is also doing our laundry. Well, sort of. It absorbs massive amounts of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and stores it in the deep ocean, locking it away for centuries. Think of it like Earth's giant carbon vault, no password required. It also helps regulate the weather. Without the ACC pushing heat around the globe, Western Europe would be 50 degrees colder. That means Paris would feel like Siberia, and Londoners would have to trade their umbrellas for snowshoes. The current helps maintain the temperature balance between the hemispheres, stabilizing wind patterns, rainfall, and ocean temperatures around the world. Even hurricane patterns could change because warm ocean surfaces are a key ingredient for cyclone formation. Mess with the currents, and you might be dialing up stronger, weirder storms. So, why is it slowing down? Well, of course, the answer is humans. You know those ice caps that are melting? Well, in Antarctica, where our friend the ACC lives, there's so much ice that if all of it melted, the Earth would rise more than 200 feet. That's taller than Cinderella's castle. What's worse, 60% of all the fresh water in the world is frozen in that ice. While that much water melting is already terrifying, it's the freshness of the water that really messes things up. You see, the ACC relies on the Southern Ocean's cold, salty water to be dense and heavy so it can sink, which helps power the current forward like a chain reaction. But when fresh water from melting glaciers pours into the ocean, it dilutes the saltiness. That makes the water less dense, so it stops sinking properly. Without that sink and flush mechanism, the ACC can't maintain its powerful flow. It's like trying to flush a toilet with no gravity. As this continues, fresh water flows north, altering the ocean's density structure and counteracting the effects of ocean warming, which normally would speed the current up. Instead, the ACC slows down. A weaker ACC means less upwelling, so fewer nutrients reach the surface. This could devastate Antarctic marine ecosystems, reducing biodiversity, collapsing fisheries, and threatening species like penguins, whales, and krill. It also opens the door in Antarctica to invasive species, like the southern bull kelp, which could throw entire food chains into chaos. Krill alone are the main food source for whales, seals, penguins, and fish. So when krill populations crash, the whole system begins to wobble like a house of cards in a hurricane. And then there's the feedback loop from hell. As the ACC weakens, more warm water can sneak southward, reaching Antarctica and melting the ice even faster. That melting will dump more fresh water into the ocean, which will weaken the current even more, which will melt more ice, and you get the idea. It's a vicious cycle. Worse still, warm waters underneath ice shelves can cause them to break apart from below, meaning the melting accelerates even when surface temperatures seem stable. Globally, the effects would ripple far and wide. Monsoons in India could become erratic, rainfall in the Amazon could drop, and agriculture from Africa to Asia could suffer. Sea levels along the east coast of North America could surge, and global weather patterns could spin into confusion. Even the Southern Ocean's ability to support commercial fisheries, like Chile's lucrative salmon industry, could decline as nutrients fail to reach the surface. And let's not forget, without a strong ACC, the ocean's ability to absorb carbon and excess heat plummets. That means that more CO2 and heat will stay in the atmosphere, making our lives even more miserable. It's like turning off Earth's air conditioner while cranking up the furnace, and burning down the pantry while you're at it. Of course, this isn't the first time things went south with the ocean currents. Before humans started heating up the planet, Earth went through a deep freeze called the Little Ice Age, and it wasn't just about colder winters. This icy chapter may have kicked off when ocean currents in the North Atlantic started acting weird. And it wasn't so long ago. This Little Ice Age had a peak in 1850, literally yesterday. Scientists believe that melting glaciers and massive exports of Arctic sea ice flooded the ocean with fresh water. That fresh water messed with the ocean's usual saltiness and density, weakening powerful systems like the AMOC, short for Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation. That's a mouthful. It's another crucial piece of the global conveyor belt puzzle. As these currents slowed down, less warm water reached the north, sea ice spread farther, and temperatures dropped even more. And here's the spooky part. Records from seashells near Iceland show that this shift didn't happen all at once. It came in two waves, like the planet was struggling to stay stable before tipping into a colder world. And because the AMOC is also part of the crazy life support system of planet Earth, everything is connected. Both systems are influenced by temperature, salinity, and the sinking of cold water. When the ACC slows, it can alter the balance of deep water formation and mixing, potentially weakening the AMOC too. That's a domino effect you really don't want to see. In fact, some models suggest that if both the ACC and AMOC are pushed past their tipping points, the result could be centuries of unstable climate conditions, way beyond anything modern agriculture or infrastructure is built to handle. So, next time you're sipping a cold drink or enjoying sushi, maybe raise a toast to the mighty ACC. It's doing a lot more for you than you think, and it could really use a little appreciation and less ice melting, please. Consider South America and Africa. Don't they kind of look like they fit together, like puzzle pieces? Well, they actually did. But about 130 million years ago, South America was like, bye, and slowly started drifting away. These days, it's around 1,800 miles from Africa, and it's still on the move. Every year, the continent shifts a little more toward the Pacific Ocean. So, how's that even happening? Tectonic plates are constantly moving. That's what makes the Earth's surface shift over time, going from this to what we see today. But those movements happen so slowly that you and I can't see them go. So, no, Brazilians or Chileans aren't out there feeling their continent inching westward. But the numbers don't lie. South America is moving, and apparently all it wants is to get as far away as possible from this massive underwater mountain range called the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. But what exactly is pushing the land toward the Pacific Ocean? It is the heat inside our planet. Way down beneath the ocean, there are cracks in the Earth's crust, and magma, super hot melted rock, rises up through those cracks. When that happens, the magma cools and hardens into solid rock. Over time, this process might build underwater mountains, like the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. And as more new crust forms, it begins to push the older crust out of the way. In the process, tectonic plates and the continents riding on top of them get pushed along. Now, on the other side of South America, over by the Pacific, there is the Nazca Plate. It's heavier and it's moving eastward. Since it is denser, it is sliding underneath the South American Plate. This entire process is called subduction, and it's happening at a rate of about 3 inches per year. By the way, the collision between these two plates is what's behind all those breathtaking volcanoes scattered throughout the Andes, and it's also making the continent move. So, if everything goes according to plan, projections show that South America will end up more centered in the Pacific Ocean in the future. But some models suggest something way crazier. Before we get into that, though, we need to clear something up. Why on earth isn't Africa following in South America's footsteps? I mean, shouldn't it be drifting west too? Well, not quite. Africa is doing its own thing because it sits on the African plate. So the Mid-Atlantic Ridge is located between those two continents, and just like it pushes the South American plate, it also pushes the African plate, but in the opposite direction. It's like this ridge is trying to split up two ex-besties, But there's more. Africa is also being influenced by the East African Rift. That's one of those massive cracks we talked about earlier, but it's happening on land, which makes it extra dramatic. This is what's causing the continent to slowly split apart. It's a long story, but let's just say the rift is pulling Africa in more directions than South America ever had to deal with. Okay, now it is finally time to talk about that crazier thing that might happen to South America and everything around it in the future. Theory number 1. It could break away from North America. I know, super dramatic, but don't panic. We're talking hundreds of millions of years from now, and I won't be around. You see, both continents are moving in the same general direction, but at different speeds. The North American plate is cruising along at about 1 inch per year, while South America is moving a bit faster. So even though they're heading the same way, they are not keeping pace. Over time, as the Atlantic Ocean continues to widen and the Pacific keeps shrinking, all this tectonic movement could eventually pull the Americas apart. Theory number 2. Marine life could go through some major changes. Right now, the Americas act as kind of a giant wall between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. Because of that, sea animals have evolved differently on each side. Take the green sea turtle, for example. The ones living in the Atlantic tend to be bigger and lighter in color. Meanwhile, their Pacific cousins are usually smaller and darker. But if, one day, there is no land blocking these two populations from mixing, they would end up with brand new migration routes, new nesting spots, and a lot more overlap in their territories. Now, multiply that scenario by hundreds of other species, and things could really get shaken up. We're talking about new interactions, unexpected competition, and maybe even the rise of entirely new species. Alright, theory number 3. America might meet Africa again. Right now, the Mid-Atlantic Ridge is busy creating a new seafloor, and because of that, the Atlantic Ocean is slowly getting wider. But in about 125 million years, scientists believe that process could come to a stop. Instead of the seafloor spreading apart, the ocean floor might start getting pulled under the continents. When that happens, the Atlantic will stop growing and start shrinking. And the water section between South America and Africa is likely to be the first part pulled beneath the land. That means the Americas and Africa could meet again. And when that happens, border countries could turn into super shaky places, with earthquakes happening all the time and brand new volcanoes popping up left and right. The eastern United States would no longer be known for the peaceful green slopes of the Appalachians, but for snow-covered giants that occasionally spew lava and ash, more like the Cascade Range out west. Countries would end up with totally new neighbors. Brazil might line up with Nigeria and Cameroon. Uruguay could be sitting right next to Angola. And Argentina might be sharing a border with South Africa. So if these two continents really do merge, how intense would that be? Well, for starters, this new supercontinent would instantly become the biggest one on Earth, about 1.5 times the size of Asia. And chances are, a brand new mountain range would form right where the continents meet, creating a natural border between nations. Being part of the same massive continent could make a lot of things way easier. For one, tourism could totally take off. People traveling between countries by land without needing pricey plane tickets could be a game changer. But it wouldn't stop there. Other types of economic activity could get a major boost too. Now on one side we have South America, which already produces and sells a wide variety of foods, from wheat to bananas, beef, cocoa, soybeans, hey, you name it. On the other side, there is Africa, exporting things like textiles and clothing. That alone would make them a super powerful bloc when it comes to trading raw goods. But can you name another important thing these two continents have in common? Yep, petroleum. Countries in South America, like Brazil, Venezuela, and Colombia, are major oil exporters. And over in Africa, you've got Nigeria, Algeria, and Libya doing the same. Now, can you see just how powerful that kind of union could be? Meanwhile, let's talk about animals. These two massive lands coming together could lead us to wild meetups, like a capybara sharing space with a Nile crocodile, or a sloth seeing a hyena from the top of a tree. This could even lead to new animal hybrids showing up, like a cabby crocodile or a sloth hyena. Okay, those weren't the cleverest names, and honestly, these animals wouldn't be able to mate or even wouldn't want to. But you get the point, right? It's not all positive, unfortunately. New species showing up could become predators, competitors, or even parasites to the native plants and animals. It would take a long time for things to settle into a new balance in those border regions. But honestly, no one really knows how long it would take. The only thing I do know is neither of us will be around to see it, which is okay. That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.